Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, episode 19. I am Chris Schmidt, and we are here to answer Cinema 4D questions live from the chat. People ask a question, and we see if we can make something really cool in cinema. Now, we did just deal with about a half hour's worth of technical difficulties, but everything seems to be working now, which makes me happy. I'm going to start opening up Cinema 4D because that was not yet open. We've got people hanging out on YouTube and Twitch. All the questions come live from the audience as we go. As I've mentioned before, I get a lot of questions. You know, people ask questions on YouTube chat. People ask questions in Slack. People ask questions in comments on Twitter and Instagram. So this is my place to say, okay, everybody show up here, and as long as you're here when it's live, then I'm going to try and tackle the questions. And that has always been our plan. Now, I want to do a couple of little announcements and just kind of little news items just to start things out, and then we'll get the questions going. So everybody make sure that you're putting the questions in there, and I'll scroll around and grab them. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. Now, couple things I would just want to kind of recap. First of all, you know, Rocket Lasso as a company, we've been around for about a year now. And I just want to make sure that everybody's kind of doing a little bit of the cross-pollination stuff where you're following on some of the different channels, because as we get ready and as we start having tools be ready to go out there, it's going to be, I'm going to kind of put little things everywhere. But if you're not already following, you know, make sure you follow Rocket Lasso on Twitter. I do a bunch of announcements there. You're going to see a lot of the news kind of up front. That's probably one of the main, it's on Slack, which we'll get to, and on Rocket Lasso Twitter account is probably the best place to get the up-to-date information, where most of the stuff gets posted there that's, you know, business related. Now, in addition to that, I have my personal Instagram account, which for a long time, that's all I had. But now I've got the Rocket Lasso account. So if you're following one, I'm not really cross-pollinating them too much. If there's something like really big and important, I might put it on both. But for the most part, this one's kind of my personal account where it's going to be like, you know, travel and friends and that kind of stuff. But the Rocket Lasso account, if you're not already following it, you should, because that's where I'm going to be posting kind of like animations and maybe little quick tips and, you know, big official things. And there's a lot of like fun little things. And I've got more little animations planned. So definitely go check that out. I think it's going to be fun. And in addition, I guess we're getting to that quickly, but these robot series that I'm working on, those are going to be available on Patreon as well, the scene files. Next up, okay, this one's a really, really, really important one for everybody. I decided a couple weeks ago that I was going to separate out the live streams from the rest of the content, because, I mean, I don't know if it's the same for you, but there's a lot of different YouTube channels I follow, and oftentimes they kind of have their very highly produced content, and then they do live streams. And the live streams are, you know, it's a very different flavor of content. And if you subscribe, you just kind of subscribe to everything. And so what I decided to do is separate out the replays. So all of these live streams I'm doing, they're still going to be out there. They're still going to be free, but I'm going to be doing the posting of these only on the second YouTube channel. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a link for this. But if you're on YouTube, you should see it in the description below. And here's a link for both Twitch and for YouTube, and it'll be in the show notes below if you're watching this after the fact. If you like watching the replays and catching the old episodes, you have to go and subscribe to this additional channel. The plan is that the main Rocket Lasso channel, that's going to be pretty much for tutorials moving forward, like tutorials and big official produced videos. All of the live stream type content is going to live on the second channel. So I haven't gotten rid of the old ones, but I have now moved everything to the new channel and copied over all the descriptions and everything. And as of right now, I want to see this number go up. Right now, there is 1 subscriber because I only just kind of opened it up. So if you want to see that stuff in the future, I'll be linking to this occasionally to be like, make sure everybody heads over there, but you got to head over to that new channel right there. Now on YouTube, I cannot get a name. I can't like get a URL name until I have 1,000 subscribers on the new one, which was really easy on the old channel, but you know, it'd be good to get an official name here so I can link to a better URL and not this goofy string of letters and numbers. So everybody head over there and grab those. That would be great if you like seeing the replays, and it separates those out. So if you're really interested in the live streams, but you don't like official tutorials, then you can just subscribe to one. If you like the opposite, you don't want to be spammed by you know, replays of the live streams, then you can just be there for the official tutorials. Now, on top of that, the next kind of pseudo announcement type thing is I am attempting to record weekly tutorials. That is a plan. The plan is I want to get a new tutorial every week. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull it off. It's actually really, really difficult to record the type of tutorials that I like creating. So what I did is I set up a new live stream that is only for people that are supporting on Patreon at a certain level. And it's a bonus stream. It's a Tutorial Tuesday live stream. And during that live stream, we kind of tinker around and figure out what the plan is going to be. And sometimes people in the chat have ideas, or they steer in a different direction, or sometimes I've been stumped and somebody has an idea. So it's kind of a fun bonus stream. And then I through their practice and then do the full recording. And then over the week, I edit it. And then after that, a week after that Tuesday, that tutorial gets posted onto Patreon. And so everybody on Patreon gets it for a week beforehand. And then a week later, it's going to be free on YouTube on the main channel. So it's kind of important to note. It's kind of a fun additional bonus stream. And if you didn't know already, on the Rocket Lasso Patreon, which is a way of supporting, obviously, and I'm not going to do this often. I hate like big advertisements. So this is just, I've waited 19 episodes to kind of talk about this stuff. But if you're supporting on Patreon, then you get at different levels, then you get access to like the live streams. Like if you're on a technician tier, you get access to live streams. If you're on any tier, then you get access to the videos early. And then there's the engineer tier where you get all the scene files. And there's actually 2 bonus live streams. There is a, let's see, is any of these handy? There's the off the record episodes, which happen on Thursdays at the same time, and they usually go on for like 2 or 3 hours, and it's kind of like going deeper onto something. Usually it's a topic that was really cool or something that we get stuck on during this live stream, and then I take that and then we go deeper on that. And I don't like doing that for the big live stream because it's just kind of me, it might be me being stumped or like even looking at the help manual and doing things, and it doesn't make for a good kind of high energy live stream, or the mainstream that's big in public. But I think it's really good for behind the scenes. So that one we've been doing for a while. It's on season 2. But now there's the brand new Tutorial Tuesday. So we just did episode 3 yesterday, but it's just a fun additional thing. So if you want to support the kind of stuff we're doing over here at Rocket Lasso, as we're attempting to get tools, which hopefully is what we're going to live off of, because right now we're essentially living off of our savings as we try and develop tools. And the Patreon is kind of a way of us like paying for our health insurance. So it's appreciated. But I did kind of do like this next, it's not really an announcement, but next kind of neat pseudo important thing is the tutorial that we recorded a week ago. I really like it. And it's a controlling gravity tutorial. And so just as a little preview, it's this video I got here. And it's all about like setting up these dominoes and being able to control it with field forces, and things can start getting crazy. And this was actually inspired by a Corridor Crew video. I'm just going to keep on jumping randomly. I don't have a specific plan here. And it's about being able to, in a single scene file in real time, transfer dominoes to have different directional forces. So let's keep going. And eventually you're going to see I get this set up, and then let's scroll here, build a little tower. And then this travels up the wall. I just really like this tutorial, so I'm spending a little extra time showing it. Come on, where is it? We gotta be able to find the part where you let this thing roll. Well, I start deleting it. Oh, I can't find the moment where we actually let this thing travel through. It's a little too sensitive there. Do it. Well, I can't find that moment. But it's cool that it transfers up the wall. And then we start going really crazy where we actually make a loop-to-loop of dominoes, and then we push it even further using field forces to the point where we start getting a big old spiral going, and we can actually spiral on the inside or we can spiral on the outside, and it's just a really nice breakdown. So this is going to be available for everybody in a week, but if you want to get early access or ever hang out on that, then you can join on Patreon, and you get all the scene files, these final scene files, and I modeled up some really nice high quality dominoes, and you get access to those as well. So I just, every once in a while I got to talk about this cross-pollination and some of the different details. Last quick things. I just want to make sure that I've got Twitch open right here. If you are watching this replay and you want to catch these things live, then it streams on YouTube and on Twitch. There's different advantages to each one, but if you follow on Twitch, then it automatically sends you an email. You don't have to like pay or anything. You just like subscribe to it, just like YouTube, and it'll send you an email when I go live. So it's a good way of getting a quick message about it. So it's kind of nice to be able to jump back and forth between those, and you can post links and whatnot. And there's advantage to YouTube and advantages to Twitch. On Twitch, you can see it almost in real time. It's only like 2 seconds behind, where YouTube's like 30 seconds behind. But on YouTube, you can pause and rewind. On Twitch, you have to watch live until the replay. And then the last tiny little thing is important to note is everybody's hanging out here. Lots of people are already on it, but it's always worth mentioning is we have a Rocket Lasso Slack. You can go hang out there with everybody else by going to rocketlassoslack.com. and get a sign up there. And it's just a really nice community of people helping each other out, answering questions, asking questions, posting cool links. There's projects and contests. It's really neat. So it's a nice place to go and hang out and meet other like-minded people who want to be creating things. It's a very nice community. And yeah, so with that big old service announcement out of the way, let's get going with the proper information. And yes, once again, just to if you're watching on YouTube, all the links that I just talked about are literally in the description below, so go ahead and click on all of those things, and that should kind of cover all of the extra information. I've been working on it's super rough. Let me show you this. If it's going to look, it is not done. I'm having some errors, but you'll see. I do like showing these off a little bit though. I've been doing those robot animations, and I had a robot that was done, but I decided I want to make an animation out of it. So I'm like way behind on that because the new tutorials eat up a lot of time. But let me pull up Daily Robot number 2. I've been working on this new animation for it. And let's see. Yeah, it's, well, I don't know if I showed this one. I think I showed this last week, the stress test where I was just wiggling it. And then I've been working on the animation, and it's not, like I said, this is not done, and there's a bunch of problems with it, and the lighting's all weird and everything. But here's kind of the current idea, and there should be audio, so I'm gonna let this play. It's using the Rocket Lasso music. Now, well, there's a couple problems. Like, first of all, I didn't design the character to be in this particular scene, so I got to work on the lighting. And then the flame is broken, and it starts shooting off into the sky. I got to figure out how to deal with that. And the desert's not very detailed or anything, but I think it's coming along. But yeah, this fella and all the scene files will be available after everything gets posted. Also on Patreon, and having fun with that when I actually have time to work on it, which is getting more and more difficult. Let's see. Oh, Joel. Yeah, I mentioned last week that Clint might be able to. Well, Clint is interested in Clint from Corridor Digital or Corridor Crew. Both did say he's interested in being a guest on the stream, but they work on Wednesdays, and so we just got to figure out when we can make that work. It will happen at some point. Also, Nick Campbell agreed to be on the stream at some point, so we got to figure out when to do that. I mean, I got a list of people I can have. Honestly, I've been so focused on some of the extra streams and transferring things over to YouTube, and I'm trying to get the website up. And there's a lot going on business-wise over here. I just have not had time to be like, oh, let me line up a guest. So anyway, I think it is time to start checking out the chat and getting some questions going, because that's why we're really here, right? Let's create some fun motion graphics things in Cinema 4D. So lots of chat's been going on. I want to scroll around and check things out. Martin, thank you very much. Let's see. Last time I think I started with YouTube, so this time I'll start with Twitch. And before I mess anything up, I'm going to jump and share the screen. Here we got Cinema S22, maybe R22, depending on what you want to do. I'm trying to think. Oh no, I'm just checking the chat to see if there's anything going here. So yeah, checking links. Oh man, Lowtech's talking about yarn. I'm scared of yarn, so we're going to avoid that for a moment. See if there's any other immediate questions that seem to pop out. Thanks for typing a big bold question, everybody. It does make it easier to see it. Oh, ooh, ugh. I like where these go. I don't like being too picky. Oh, Lowtech's said it earlier. Ooh, okay. Well, Michael is asking something that's kind of up my alley. I want to click that one first. So Michael has a question about controlling dynamic fall. Here's an example of keyframes by hand. Let's see what we got. What if you want them to form a specific shape after they fall? I'm going to pull this over here. Bing, bing, bing. Okay, yeah, so that's a cute little animation. And the idea would be, what if we wanted this to be a dynamic sim? And actually, that's a really good question. That is a really... there's no audio from that, right? I don't think there is. It's a really good question because it's actually a pretty common thing. There was, back in the GSG days, it just goes to, if you want things to end in a particular spot, there's two different approaches to take. One would be, I think, just forcing it to follow position. So what's a good way of doing this? I mean, it's actually a little clunky. I guess we maybe, well, I'll show maybe the pseudo bad version of this and we'll see where it goes from there. But we'll make a few materials just so that this isn't completely bland. So let's say that we have that, and then we have a sphere, and let's even use a figure just to make it difficult on ourselves. And we'll put him up there. And let's say that these are the shapes, and we want them to get to this final layout. So, and then we'll even make a floor just so it has something to bounce off of, even if we don't end up seeing it. So that can be exactly at -100 if we're being precise. And I'm going to say that won't render, but we can still see it here while we're working on it. And even turn on some SSAO so we can see that. And I mean, we always make things from scratch whenever we can, but I could make make a light here, turn on some shadow, and turn that on. Now we can actually see if that's going to strike the floor. It's taking a little bit of time in setting up this kind of feedback is really useful for, if we're about to tinker with dynamics, it's really useful to be able to tell from contact shadows if everything's actually touching. So just a little thing there. Now let's select all of our objects and say simulation rigid body. Now, if I play right now, it's, a couple things might fall. Okay, I wasn't thinking about the figure is getting his pieces individually, which is adorable. There's the refresh issue, so you have to get this working properly. I have to rewind and go back, and then actually he's staying broken. That's a bad refresh issue. Come on, figure. He doesn't want to rebuild. Go live again. Huh, okay, well, figure decided to super break. That's not great. And I bet even if we delete if we did delete the dynamic stack, he comes back again. But that's not great. But just as a way of doing this quickly, I'm going to throw the figure into a connect object and then move the dynamics onto that. So he'll be treated as a single object now. So it's all dynamic, and he's actually balanced on there pretty well. We placed everything pretty precisely, so nothing's falling too much. But obviously, the trick here is, let's say that they're not precisely in their spot. So that is up in the air and this is up in the air, and we want them to end in that final location. So while those seemed okay, if this was bouncing around or we wanted little animations on it, having very specific positioning, then what we can do is disable our dynamics. So let's say dynamic off. Actually, we can just turn off the checkbox for a moment, and let's keyframe these. So at a particular time, let's say the frame of 45, we want all of these objects to be in this particular position at this particular rotation. Now, you can't move things when the dynamics are turned on, which is why I turned them off. But then let's rewind and say, okay, this is fine. But let's say at this time, all of these are up in the air. And at this, we can even, I mean, we're going to keep it limited, but let's move all three of them up a little extra far. So that can be up. And let's say the cube is not quite as far up, and it can be rotated a little bit. And the sphere, maybe this will be off to the side a bit. And the figure, it can also be tilted, maybe that direction, maybe even back. So it's just like, okay, they're all slightly doing their own thing. So select all those again. And again, at the time of 0, they'll be up in the air in this position and rotation. So all of them right now will just do a slow transition into that final position. Okay, that's fine, but they're not dynamic. So let's go ahead and turn those dynamics on and say that indeed they are dynamic. So now those keyframes don't mean anything. These are just dynamically falling. You see everything's going to bounce and roll away and do their own thing. Now, if you were doing it this way, let's say they're supposed to be like really bouncy. So let's add like 55% bounce so they can fall and bounce. It's actually taking them a little while to get where they're going, but I don't even know if we'll get a great result out of this. I don't want to overthink it. But now you can see that they're just falling to their own dynamic thing. But we have this really neat thing inside of dynamics, which is called, well, a couple things. We have dynamic transition, which could mean these are dynamic, and then at a certain point, they won't be dynamic. And they will transition from being dynamic or not dynamic over the course of this many frames. So let's make this pretty quick. And it might look bad. I mean, I actually usually have a lot of trouble making this work. But it's a dynamic transition. So I'm going to turn that on. And I'm going to say that I want them to go from being dynamic, and then let's say right around there, I want them to transition into their actual final state. It might look a little bit weird right now, but let's see what happens. Let's keyframe that, and then a single frame forward, I say dynamic off, and keyframe that. So It might be good to give these a couple. I'm going to grab all of the keyframes we recorded on them and just give them like 10 extra frames, just so there's a little bit of space between them. So let's see what happens now. They should be fully dynamic, and they're going to bounce off each other. And then you see how they suddenly are like, whoop, and they jump into their final position. Now they are dynamic as they're doing that transition until a particular moment. Now, these are able to scoot past each other. You see how the sphere is actually doing a pretty nice job, all things considered, of like scooting past the cube. You see it's kind of rolling up and then getting into position. So it's like, okay, that's kind of neat. But if things are too far afield and they can't transition as quickly as this is telling them, it could pop. Now, let's try changing the time. And yeah, this is now 2 frames. And let's see. Yeah, you see it's kind of just, it's a pop that's happening. Let's go frame by frame. You see it's there, and suddenly it's over here, and you see the cube has been forced through the floor, and this scoots in, and now we're past what seems to be the transition time, and now they're slowly kind of fading into that spot. It's weird. Like it said, it's a 2-frame transition, but it's taking longer than that. So it's something you can do, but I've never gotten it to work great. I tend not to use dynamic transition, but I wanted to throw out there that it was a thing. Now, the next tool we can use is I'm going to hold down Control and Shift as I click on the dynamic keyframe as a way of killing off all the keyframes. The entire track is gone. So now it's just fully dynamic the entire time again. Now we have our objects and they want to be traveling to these positions. So now, of course, the next thing we can do is follow position and follow rotation. What's cool about these is we can keyframe them. So we have a follow position, follow rotation. So let's hit play and go bink, 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 and they're bouncing all over the place. But something we might be able to do is transition into that. Now let's let them kind of fall on the ground here. So it's like, okay, they're not doing anything we want them to, but let's record them at this time. And then let's say over the next, bunch of frames here, 25-ish frames, let's do a follow position, a follow rotation about 5. That's a very reasonable, but pretty high number. So based on that, let's just see what that does. Oh, wait, what's going on there? There's a weird pop happening. Let me double check what's going on. They are dynamic and there is no transition. I don't. What was that pop that happened? What? What did I do wrong here? The dynamics were keyframed, but I killed the dynamics. See, dynamic keyframe, and it's supposed to be on. I said I killed the keyframes. So I'm not sure. I might have done something weird there. It's super easy to fix. So let's just go ahead and add new dynamic tags on there. We don't really lose anything doing that. I'll say rigid body, and we can make them bouncy again, 55, or I think we go higher, let's say 88. So those should be pretty bouncy again. And now everything should just be back to normal. We shouldn't see a pop. Yeah, so those are going to bounce to their own thing. Okay, so now we'll jump back to frame 55. Actually, I'll go a couple frames later so we can move it around easily. So let's keyframe, follow position, and let's jump towards the end, and let's transition that back to 5. I'm not sure about that hiccup, but let's see if it does another pop again. Bing. Oh, it does. Keyframing the follow position by itself seems to do it. Is there a difference between... Well, that's kind of new. So I have well, it doesn't seem to like doing this transition, but I'm going to try putting it to like something really low, like 0.1. So it's very low follow position, practically none. And does that make the transition better? Yeah, okay, interesting. It doesn't, I don't remember this ever being a thing, but I also don't keyframe follow position very often. It doesn't seem to like going from 0 to a bigger number. It will suddenly pop. So we sort of just did a little workaround, but it's not too bad. Oh, the follow rotation is a little high, but I'm going to set these both to 0.001. Let's see if that works. Copy. Paste. So keyframe both of those. So now they're as low of a number as they could be, and then they're going to transition up to something pretty high. I don't know if that's maybe a new weird thing or just something I never noticed before. But you can see they should be behaving pretty much the same. And then we'll give ourselves a couple extra frames here. Now they suddenly are following the position and rotation a little bit more, and it's slowly transitioning into those. And you can see suddenly it's trying to get to that position. Now we did relatively low numbers there, so I could select that keyframe and we can crank this up to 11. That's pretty high now, but it does transition slowly, so they should be able to be like, and they're trying, but you see even the figure is not super gung-ho about getting into that final position there. So this can work, but it can also itself be a little bit weird. Now, technically, if we're trying to make that transition happen, you'd want this to happen a lot earlier because the currently, like, the keyframes kind of stop at 55. So I guess we'd want this transition to start around frame 40-ish and then have it already be done by the time it's getting to its final position. So it's kind of like we're transitioning from these dynamics. Oh, looks like it has to go even earlier. Just remember that. Let's see where the dynamics hit, actually. Pretty much like right about now should be the time that they are like, oh, I'm supposed to be in this position. So we could just eyeball that. I'll pull this back to frame 20. So it's free falling at 20, and around frame 35, it should be like, no, I'm pretty heavily trying to get to a particular spot. So, okay, you see right there, that was a better transition. It seems like our gravity is still strong enough that it doesn't perfectly want to do, but you see how you kind of get the soft transition, a softer transition. I like this better than turning on the dynamic transition because these are fully dynamic all the time and they'll never just pop into that new one. Although it does still, I'm surprised. 11's a really high number. I thought this would be stronger. I'm gonna try doubling it up again, maybe just on the rotation. But yeah, finally the figure standing. So yeah, you see that's sort of something, but this still feels a little bit clunky to me. So that's kind of like a second method. Now let's do what I think I would actually do in the circumstance. And, just to keep everything clean, I'm going to delete the dynamics. Let's fast forward to the end, and I'm actually going to delete all the keyframes as well. So there's a lot of advantages to this method. Delete all the keyframes, so now nothing should be happening. Nothing's keyframed. So let's make them dynamic again. Rigging, simulation, rigid body. Okay, so now we're back to that. And now what my thought is let's animate this in reverse. They're in their final position, but we want them to drift off into the air. So yeah, we just do the entire thing in reverse. Now, we could control this via a bunch of different methods. I'm kind of thinking if these are like very stable the way they are right there, which they pretty much are, let's just use like a wind and blow them up. Currently gravity is pushing down. We could turn off gravity if we wanted to. That's completely valid. But in this particular circumstance, I don't even think we have to do that. I'm going to grab a wind. I'm going to point it upward. And with this upward wind, we want this to counter push them. Now, if we type in a 40, that's going to be exactly the same as gravity. So if I type in 80, it's going to be enough to be the opposite of gravity. It's going to counter gravity and be the equal opposite of gravity. Just kind of a thing. So we should see these fall up into the air now, pretty much the same way that everything else would. Man, that figure just does not want to like refresh properly. The other ones are. It's in the connect and whatnot, but still, it's bugging me. Fall off, linear. So I'm going to feed in the wheel, in the wind, in the fall off, a linear field that will be on. I can never remember y plus or y minus. Oh, we rotated it. So actually it's supposed to be Z plus. Yeah, so in this case, Z plus. And if I play, do they fall up? No. So now this linear field is what we need to transition through and actually make them fall. So we could now manually say at the beginning, this is all good. And then very quickly, I'm going to transition into them falling. So we can keyframe, we could keyframe the wind, but I'm just going to keyframe the linear field. And we'll just keyframe all the position and hit play. And over, let's say, that amount of time, I want this to have transitioned to be fully below. Really, it just has to hit the axis of the object, and that's enough. But let's keyframe that again. And with that transitioning through, then now the figure and then the ball and then the cube will each start floating up into the air. At the same time, if we want to get a little bit of randomness going, a little chaos, let's create a turbulence. We can also use a field force, but let's keep it simple. We'll make a field force, and this field force, typically I jump this up to something like 55, just so we can very clearly see this. Thank you for the YouTube donation there. It's the second one ever. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. From Donato. Thank you very much. But anyway, we're giving this some strength. We're giving it some scale. Hitting play. Okay, now I'm going to turn off the wind just temporarily, and let's just look at what the turbulence is doing. So if we hit play, you can see that the turbulence is making that randomly move and start wiggling around a little bit, and it even knocks the figure over. And the cube is on the ground, so the friction is not allowing it to do much, but it should give us some extra wobble. What I'm thinking is let's tell the turbulence to use a fall off, and the fall off will be the same linear field, so it doesn't have any effect until it passes through. So now, as we let that transition through, they'll drift up in the air, and they'll be randomly moving. Now, if you were inclined, this is not going to make them randomly rotate. Actually, to make them randomly rotate, you have to do slightly fancier things. You have to make them soft body, which I don't really want to do. Trying to think of any way we could force it to affect rotation. It's not really a thing. Yeah, I can't in a trivial way think about doing it. We might be, because of the nature of the scene, it might not be too bad to say, hey, you are no longer a rigid body. You're actually a soft body, and you're very... Actually, we can just put lots of structural and tons of stiffness. So it should be essentially a soft body that is so stiff that it should remain its shape. And now each individual point is being calculated for these forces. It's getting a little wobbly, but you see it does fly away. Maybe these values were a little high. Okay, better. Yeah. Too big of a numbers on springs are a bad idea. But now you can see, because it's a soft body, it's actually calculating each of them individually. And now you can actually see that twisting up into the air as they decide to float away. So the idea turns into somebody in chat's asking if we could just add the turbulence into the wind. Yes, but that's only turbulence blowing in a particular direction, like up and down. Actually, I don't know if, yeah, wind has turbulence, but it's only going to be turbulence in that particular direction. I wanted this to be pushing left and right, in and out, and that would only be variation on the up and down. But yeah, you can see all those floating away, and I don't want to go too far on it, but a lot of it just goes to, let's bake this. I'm going to hit Control or Command D, Dynamics, Cache, Bake. And now it baked like instantly. And now I should be able to scrub my timeline. You would just see it. And I'll just hit, there used to be a backwards play button. I think there might, is there a shortcut to make that play backwards? No. But you can play backwards. There's a reverse play button. Let's go to Customize Palettes and search for, let's see, play backwards. Haha. I can grab play backwards, put it right there. Haha. Now I can hit play backwards. So now you can see that this entire thing is rewinding, and now you see, boop, and now you see how it all feels a little bit more organic. Now they're not like bouncy or anything, but this type of setup can be really good for, like, if you want like books to fly off a bookshelf, you do it in reverse. You can't possibly get books to slide smoothly back into a bookshelf, but you can have them slowly individually slide out forward, and just on that one shot where they're all interacting, you can do it in reverse. So that's my thought on that. So I made that a little fancier than it needed to be, but I thought there were some interesting different directions and details. Worth noting that every time you see me save a scene file, that you can get access to these on Patreon. Bink, bink, bink. Link below. Reverse dynamics. Baked. Ba-da-da. I do want to throw out there, Donato did not do it, and I do appreciate the donation. And yeah, if people want to donate, that's super appreciated. But don't donate and ask a question. I don't ever want to do preference based on money, based on that kind of stuff. That's why this is just, hey, everybody in chat has equal access to it as we jump around. So that was a question from Twitch. So let's see if we can find something in YouTube. Yeah, it's okay, Digital. Let's find a repost a question. Just don't spam it, and it's all good. So make dynamic spheres in the emitter interact with cloth. Okay, you want dynamic spheres in the emitter to interact with cloth. The problem you found is that the particles only the particles interact with cloth, not the dynamic objects themselves. Oh, okay, I think I follow. Let me take a look. Let's open up a new file, and you're saying, well, one of the main problems here is you're saying cloth. So cloth is one system, and dynamics is a different system. And we don't have a uniform system yet in cinema. I hope to one day that we do, but as of right now, we don't. I'm going to make a plane, leave it default, make it editable, and now... actually, it'd be a good idea to rotate this first. And a thing with cloth is it doesn't like objects refreshing after it's been applied. So let's just turn that sideways. Now make it editable. Now select all the top points, right click, simulation, cloth, and then under dresser, I'm going to fix those points. So as simple as that, we now have a piece of dynamic cloth that is, hanging down. So, a lot of this goes into like the feedback of the systems. You are specifically saying, let's not meander too much. Let's open up and let's make a plain old cinema basic emitter, and we'll emit 1 particle per, I think, second. And lifetimes, the speed's probably pretty low. I'll drop that or jump it up to 555. And even a little bit of spacing here is fine. So we get pew, pew, pew. So 1 particle per second, a couple extra frames. And then inside the emitter, you want to create a sphere, as you are attempting to do. T for scale. I'll make an icosahedron, and we'll make it very low poly just so we can do a lot of them and not slow down too much. And if we click in the emitter and say show the objects, then we should, oh, and I'm going to tell this to emit forever. Pew, 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 pew. So those are now shooting, now obviously not interacting with the cloth at all. So the first thing that I would try would be, well, you want them to be dynamic, and this is where maybe it gets tricky, is if I hit simulation rigid body, then these are now, they're emitted as a dynamic object. But after that, they don't care about the particle. And in fact, you'll see, how do I show it? Maybe they change. I thought you could still see the particle doing its thing. Maybe if I put this into a connect, we can see it. No, the connect kind of breaks it. I don't think the particle is actually flying down. The particle, if we turn this off, is it going to show it? I guess it's to show objects. The particles are still flying forward. They don't stop doing that. But what it's doing is right when a particle is created, it's creating a custom initial velocity for this dynamic object and then spitting it forward, which is, that's fine. If we change the speed, it will change the speed that they're created. Pew, pew. So, that's all good. But we need this to interact with the cloth. I'm going to pull this in the air a little bit so it actually hits it. So those are dynamic, but those dynamic systems can't interact with the cloth dynamics. So we also need to make this into a cloth collider. So I'm going to say simulation cloth collider, but I think it needs to be, no, and it does seem to, oh, okay. No, now I'm seeing what you were talking about. So what's happening is you see that this is flying down. It should hit the cloth down lower, but you're going to see that it's actually hitting up there from where the particle is. So that's the problem. And that is a bit of a problem. Let's essentially see if we can figure out a workaround here, because these are flying dynamically and they're not colliding where we want them to. So I'm going to delete the collider tag from there, and these are currently shooting this way. The first thing I'm going to check is, can we clone onto those properly? So I'm going to make a matrix object, and we'll have it calculate after the emitter by dragging it below and set it to object mode. And let's set the object to the emitter. And this should emit on, or you can see immediately it's cloning out to the surface. But I'm going to say I want to clone out to the axis. And it's really tiny, but I'm going to make it super tall. So yeah, you can see actually it is there in the center, which is maybe a good thing. Let's hit play. Ooh, yeah, not great. You can see that these are actually cloning onto the particle, not the dynamic object that just kind of took its inspiration from the initial position of the emitter. So if those aren't following it, we can see the same, there's the same reason why the collisions were happening as the cloth was hitting it. So how can we make these actually follow that? Now I set this to this matrix to axis, which I would hope would work. Now these other ones did seem to be working. If I turn on polygon center, it is cloning onto the actual geometry there. It seems to be. So if we hit play, oh no, they're still traveling forward. That's kind of weird, because that's not where the geometry is. Now, something we were seeing was, and it's just something I've been noticing a lot, is if we put this into a connect object, which has always been our, hey, if you put in a connect, everything just starts working. But it has not actually been the case lately. If we clone onto the connect instead of that, we can see that these are still traveling forward, and it's kind of completely broken what we had been seeing from these. So that's a bit of a challenge there as well. I'm trying to think of, I mean, we can actually, we could put gravity on the particles, and we can clone onto that particle that's falling down, but that's not exactly what you're going for. So this is kind of roundabout, but the thought I have is going back to our old, and let's see if this even works. I'm going to delete all that. Let's go back to our old, let's try and make an emitter behave, or let's try and make a cloner behave like an emitter. But this is a simpler version of it, and it actually might be a really good use case for it. So here's the thought. Let's make a cloner with that same sphere, regular dynamic sphere, and we're going to start cloning. I'm going to have the Y go to 0, so they're all in the exact same location. And let's just say there's 1 at the beginning. And in the dynamics tag, let's say that it has a custom initial velocity of z, x, y, z of 555. So in the first frame, that should go pew and fire forward pretty much exactly the way our emitter was. So I'll scoot that up in the air. So once again, we should be able to see it fly forward, and then it will strike the cloth. Now let's make sure that this singular one will acknowledge a cloth collider. So I'll put cloth collider on their hit play. And okay, it does acknowledge that. I mean, it's getting really caught up in it, but that's probably just more of a question of friction than anything. Let's go to the friction here and let it slide more freely off of it. Hopefully that sort of does. It's kind of still catching in it. I'm not terribly worried about that, to tell you the truth, but let's just make it bigger and hopefully it's enough to okay, stop ripping the cloth away. I mean, eventually it does pull out, but this is not the point of this one. I don't really care about that. I'm going to keep on lowering it until it's just kind of catching the bottom there. Man, it's really sticky. No friction, please. Yeah, I just kind of want it to bounce off it. I'm going to increase the couple polygons so maybe it can more smoothly go. It's just really sticky. Like I said, I'm not really worried about that. That's not the part worried about. Anyway, let's see if we can make this kind of behave like an emitter. So the thought is, let's keyframe the count, and then let's say over the course of 50 frames, this will go up 5. So every 10 frames, it should kind of be creating one. So let's keyframe that. Now that's not linear, so let's select those keyframes and say that they should be linear. And let's see if each, you now see that each subsequent one is being generated, but it still gets that same initial velocity. What's cool is, well, they all exist from the moment they're born. They keep on existing forever. So unlike an emitter, they won't die, but they are kind of live right away. Now, how do we make this work? I wonder if if we can randomize them. Let's put a randomize and just randomize the position a bunch here. So we'll just let those randomize like that. And will they pop into existence? Yeah, they do. Yeah, they pop into existence at random locations. And you should see that they are all kind of randomly dynamic. Boom, boom, boom. Now the cloth is not happy with the way we're hitting it, but like I said, I'm not worried about that part. So yeah, the emitter is not cooperating with us, but we can treat a cloner like an emitter in this circumstance, and we could just change this keyframe. If we jump this, change the keyframe right here from a 5 to a 10, then it should be making them twice as quick. You don't want them to collide with each other, so don't make them too quick, or they have to be small enough to be able to do that. And the random actually is going to counter that a little bit, but pew, 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 pew. So yeah, that's kind of my advice on that. It's kind of a workaround, but I think that it does work. I'll give this a quick save and we'll keep on going. 2. Oop, come on, keyboard. I can't see the keyboard behind the microphone. Cloner, emitter, to collide with cloth. When you can't think of a clever name, be literal. Yeah, I'm not, Dean, I'm not sure what's going on with the way the friction's working on that. Yeah, there was friction all over, or zero friction all over the place, but could you do a cloner setup with 1 clone in the emitter? Could you put your cloner setup with 1 clone in an emitter? I'm not sure I'm following. I mean, it's kind of what we did is what it is. I mean, I guess actually I do have a slight question, actually, which would be what would happen if here's a slight tweak on it, actually, that might be better. I don't know if it'll work, but let's go and grab our emitter again, and I'm going to set that back down to 1, 1, and we'll have that again emit forever. And so now those are individual particles flying out doing their thing. But what if we told this cloner, you are not linear, you are an object, and that object you're cloning onto is going to be the emitter? Will it create the new one as each one is generated? And does it take the information from the initial state of this, and then will they be fully dynamic? So let's turn off the random. So now you can see every time a particle gets created, it's creating that. And you can see that this seems to be getting flung out faster than the emitter. But that's strange. Oh, that's bizarre. The emitter. Wow, this is so weird. The emitter doesn't have anything. It doesn't have a child or anything, but the cloner is cloning onto it, but it seems like it's still acknowledging the emitter as the base of where, see, these are not hitting it, but you'll see the particle does. Isn't that strange? I can't account for that. It's just weird. Oh, yeah, that's possibly true. Basil's saying that if you bake it, it works. That's definitely a case I've been finding more often, is that if you do just bake things, it seems to work better. I don't have the other one saved, but that'd be something to possibly explore. I'm going to scroll up on, was that a Twitch question? No, that was a YouTube question. So, low tech, can you make this but dynamic? Hang on, it's a advertisement. Skip ad. All right, what do you got? Okay, we got actual footage from Insider, Art Insider, from Trish Anderson, a fabric artist. So the question specifically about frame, or the time code of 9 seconds. Right about now. That seems, as far as I can tell, that's a time lapse of somebody doing. What process is even happening right now? Like, I think there's a person behind there. You can see their hand pushing in. And my assumption is that they've got this wire mesh here, and they've got a fluffy material, and they're taking a needle, and they're using the needle to force a part of the string, like this big fluffy string, through one of the holes, and they're doing that again and again and again. So it's kind of just popping out one side. That's my guess. It's a little difficult to tell, because you can see that same thing kind of happening here. Super bizarre. Oh, okay, it's a big old machine doing it. Oh, well, maybe it was not so much time lapse as, although I probably have this. No, it is normal speed. But yeah, I do think it's the same concept I'm saying. It's just that it has a series of needles all doing it automatically. So it's not a person pushing against it. It's that machine is constantly like interjecting a bunch of little threads again and again. So it's neat. I like it. Now, the question comes in, is there anything we can do like it? I mean, it's like a yarn gun. I don't know if it's putting individual threads or if it's putting a loop of thread through it. On a certain degree, it kind of doesn't matter. It's actually, it does have a name, a rug tufting gun. And okay, it is a loop. Not surprising. I mean, it's probably even tying in the back. Now, a lot of this goes into, when it comes to these type of fabric-y things, yarn things, like, we're not trying to make it literal. It just has to kind of give that illusion. You don't need to build it for real. I mean, some things we do try and make for real, and it's really cool. But in this type of circumstance, I don't think you need to make it real. Now, can we actually make it do something like this? Especially if it's a loop. Like, can you create a series of clones? Well, it depends on what you're trying to do here. Because what I'm thinking is, if we just made a very simple loop of spline, and then what I want is it to be like a little bit dynamic, because you can just clone onto it, and that's pretty straightforward. I mean, well, let's do the generic version first. Let's create a sphere, or a circle spline. I'm gonna let's rotate it to be flat on the ground. hit C, go to points. I'm going to select these 2 points, T for scale, scale them way down, and there you go. We got a loop. Now the loop can go at the back if we want. We could also grab this one, and actually if we hit US, actually we have to grow the selection, hit US, and it's actually going to create a subdivision right there. So if you were inclined, you could grab this and say break segment right there, delete, and don't close it, and now you see that will actually be open. We can also just delete them here, so we just literally have the loop from that point forward. You could leave the entire double loop back there. Stylistically do whatever you want there. Now I hit T for scale this way down. It's like, okay, cool, we got a loop of cloth. And now, at that point, it's as simple as putting that into a cloner, cloning onto an object. The object will be this plane. It will clone onto the polygon center. It looks like this is facing the other direction, so I'm going to say Z plus and refresh, maybe. There. So now they're all facing forward, and depending on the scale here, we can, if we made a lot more of these, let's make more, say 40. So now we've got a lot more clones. Come on, cloner, refresh. Not a lot more clones centered on those, and then create a random effector. This random effector can enable it to, I guess, some positions. Okay, we'll do some Y and X. So we'll do 5 and 5 and 0. That's way too much. Our scale is bigger or smaller than I thought it was, so just a little variation in there. We can go to scale and do a little bit of, it doesn't have to be uniform. Let's do a little bit of, 0.2 scale. Maybe more, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. So yeah, you can get all this variation in their scale. And of course, the most important one is going to be some rotation. Now, let's be careful. Oh, yeah, we do a little bit on kind of tilting left and right. And then let's do, this is up and down. And I'm actually fine with there being some randomness on that. And then the twisting one, I think we go pretty far. So you do something like that. Now, you see we're getting something that does feel very clothy, like a bunch of different loops. That works pretty well. We can always go back to our original geometry here. And if it's too fat, then we can just hit T for scale and make it not quite as big. And now these should maybe not quite overlap as much. And then if we wanted them to inherently have a little bit of droop to them, then we could do that, probably even inside the transform. We did a lot of twisting and whatnot, but if we push the right one, yeah, we could tell these to push down a little bit. So they do randomly go up and down, but we'll have in general a little bit of a downward motion. So you get all these nice loops, and depending on how far away we are, especially once we start getting to this type of distance, I think that kind of thing might work really well. Let's try and create a hair material, because that will render incredibly quickly for us. Actually, something I've been doing is instead of making the hair material and doing all the render settings, let's just create I'll grab the plane, say simulate, add a hair object, and then delete the hair object. And now it set up the render settings for us. So we can drop this. I want to see if it works, actually. I'm going to drop the hair material directly on the hair, on the cloner, and hit render. And okay, cool, it did render. You see that these are rendering. Now, let's create, we got our color. I don't know if the hair, if it will actually do variation. Let's make a nice green color. Let's do let's do 15 or 15% variation on that. I'm gonna go to length, and we're gonna make this a lot thicker. Let's say 2 by 2. And let's see if that shows up and if they have variation. They seem not to have variation. I'm not surprised. I was hoping they would, but this variation is not carrying through on the clone. We could try putting on the parent, but then, yeah, it doesn't render at all. And then we could try combining all these via a connect, but it probably won't acknowledge them as a spline at all. We might be able to trick it into being a spline by saying it's a spline mask, still doesn't render. Put that on spline mask, still doesn't render. So yeah, the variation sadly doesn't come through via that methodology. Now, what we were seeing here, in the reference, it was, each one's very specific. It didn't have any variation, but it would be nice if we could get some variation. Let's put a pin in that for now and maybe come back to it. So now they are thicker, and we get, we get these curves. The speculars are very bright and specific, so we could pull off a lot of the sharpness, so it should make them feel a lot softer. And then, this is pretty bright, so we can pull back on those. Yeah, it's a little bit better. Although I do think, just relative to what we're seeing, we probably want the thickness to be pretty thick, so I can crank these up a bunch. Now, of course, we could sweep. Yeah, I mean, something like that. And even the idea of doing a little bit of transparency on it. Let's just make them fully opaque and then pull back on the fully opaque and pull back on this slider. Nope, doesn't work that way. So we'll just make this so weird that that pulls open a knot like that. But now they should be slightly transparent, so they get just a little bit softer. You can kind of see through them. I don't know if that's a good thing. I'm just throwing out options for you. Now, these are splines. It should run pretty quick, which means if we wanted these to kind of be appearing, we're going super old school here. Very simple things. We can grab a plane and let's scale them. A couple of things. Let's do both position. So here's them pushing in all these different directions. So we want this to calculate first. Let's deal with that quickly. In the cloner, first it's calculating the random and then the plane is getting applied. But let's pull the plane before the random, so that gets calculated first. So now as I drag this, you see they're not going in all those crazy directions. And now we need these to go negative on Z like that. So I'm going to have them pull through. And we'll also have them scale into existence. I'm not sure if that's a good idea, or if that's fair, but let's do a uniform scale of -1. So you should be at 0. And yeah, okay, nobody likes the specular. We'll kill off the specular. So now we can grow it via whatever we want. Actually, it would be really fun. We can do a spherical field. Look, it's adorable already. So this could be a pretty cool effect in general. So we make the spherical field and let's invert it. So I'm going to say remapping invert. So it's only appearing in this particular location. We can drag this around like this. Although this is always a weird, tricky thing because what's actually happening is we're doing the opposite. We're actually using a plane and we're shrinking it. So it's like we're not growing it in. We're actually shrinking it away. So we can say, yes, we want the opposite. But every subsequent field, we have to keep in mind that we're doing the opposite. So what I want to do is create a decay and crank it up to maximum. But if I hit play, if I move this around, you're going to see actually it does the opposite of what we want. So we actually have to set that to minimum, I think. Yeah. So now with this set to minimum, you can see I can actually drag this around and they'll all transition that way. Now, they are taking on the color of the field. I wonder if we could feed that into the hair material. That'd be really nice if we could. You can see how they're all green right now, but the individual splines seem to be, oh yeah, this decay is a different color than the rest of them. So let's see if that does feed through. I kind of doubt it, but let's just give it a try. Under color, under this texture, let's try feeding it a MoGraph color shader. And that should just override everything. And let's hit render. They're coming through black, not encouraging. And it's seeing the color. So that's possibly no good. And let's try doing it on surface. Actually, no, this should work with surface. And then that kind of change. Yeah, we can invert everything. So I'm going to slightly change the rig as we are building it. I'm going to make a copy of the plane and make this one editable. And with it set to editable, we can do a couple things. First of all, let's make a vertex map. So let's set vertex weight, set to 0. That is going to use the fields. It's specifically going to use this color, and that can use a decay set to maximize. And that's because we're going to grab the sphere and don't invert it. So now we've got that. Now, that's got nothing to do with the plane effector. It's not seeing that at all. So now what we could do is say, hey, plane effector, what you should actually be seeing. Yeah, that's what we're actually getting. So plane effector, you should be seeing this vertex map. But when you get that vertex map, I want you to do the opposite. So invert. So now we have a positive vertex map, which is nice. In order for us to see something, I'm going to reset PSR with our nice little spherical fall off and just add on a vibrate tag. Position X and Y. 300 by about 300, speed of 1. Okay, so you see that's just going to be going around drawing for us, which is just fine with me. Let's give this a save because we haven't done that. Scene file. Actually, I kind of like we're going kind of a low tech with this one. I know we're getting a little bit fancy, but we're not going all super crazy with the dynamics, and it seems like as we're growing, they look pretty good. I don't mind it. Wait, what did lights please? What was somebody called it a gun? What was the gun name? The rug tufting gun. I love it. So let's call this that rug tufting gun. Okay, so that is feeding through. Now this is unfortunate because it doesn't show up in the viewport, but we can create a vertex color tag. Let's do that. So I'm going to say, hey, plane. you are going to be fed a other tag, vertex color. This vertex color is going to be based off of what? Well, it's going to be based on a field. The field is not going to have a freeze, but it is going to have our other vertex map. So it's just going to reference that. And inside of there, we can go into remapping, enable remapping, and then under color remap, we can make whatever colors we like. So let's remap it as a gradient. And now you can see that any place that the fabric comes in is going from black to white. I don't even know if we... I mean, this is just enabling the color. Do we want the color to change as we go? I don't know. We're just having fun with it. So let's go from a gray to... Oh, the green was fine. I like the green. That's more of a teal. That's fine. I can live with that. So now you can see that's going right. And now it's creating a vertex color map, which is getting color information. So now that we've done that, we can go into... Oh, that was the hair object would see it. The cloner might not. I don't know. This might not work. We just did all that. I was confident it would work, but actually now I think about it, it might not. So if we go to, I'm going to try feeding under texture, but I think surfaces are better bet, but neither of them might work. So let's try doing that. It's white. And that doesn't seem to be working. I'm going to, I thought it worked if we fed that in. So this goes back to it would have to be hair. I really wanted these colors to work. A lot of this goes into that we're using hair. If we swept these and we wouldn't need hair. Yeah. Sorry if we're doing a bit of a dead end on that. I do like these being vertex maps, but yeah, sorry. I lost us all our momentum because it's not accepting the vertex tags. I was thinking of the hair workflow, and we're rendering with hair, but we're not using a hair object. So that's where my confusion came in, and that's why we're having trouble with that. So we're back to our ugly green hairs. Let's go ahead and create a light just to give these maybe a little more oomph. It's not going to be much, but... Render. It's a lot longer to render, but yeah. Oh, there we go. It looks way better. It's not going to look amazing, but it's going to look better. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's not bad. And we can even add a little bit of fuzziness on them. But it goes back to they're all being green and they're still hairs. Now, our entire rig still works. And, you know, this will still trace around and randomly draw them. And I think that's by itself is kind of cool. They're transitioning in kind of nicely if we wanted. I mean, you can always give them a little bit more life by adding some sort of wiggly overlap of some sort. One thought would be maybe in this plane, we could give it a spring. I'm not sure if this is a good idea, but let's add a decay and set it to spring. Yeah, so you see there's a little bit of springiness to it that automatically came through. We could maybe unclamp and it can go in and out. Now, if we pull that springiness back really low, like not 100, but drag it down to 10, so you can just see there's like that little bit of life to it. But of course, cloth isn't terribly springy. I'm just trying to give it like a little bit of something. And they are supposed to come in pretty quick, so it's just kind of giving them that little bit of a wiggle. In addition, I mean, it's more like you'd want them to maybe, you know, slowly tilt their way down or something. So there's, you know, potential for that as well. It could potentially delay behind it. It's actually an incredibly simple setup, all things considered. And I don't think it's not giving terrible results. Going back to the color idea, if we did want to color these, I think we have to get away from a hair material, like as nice and as fast as the hair material is. It's just not going to work for us. So it turns into that these need to be actual geometry. Now with the cloner has the new multi instance. I think that might actually work, and it might be pretty quick. So let's just try sweeping. I hold down Alt as I create a sweep, and I hold down Shift as I create an inside. And let's temporarily turn that off so we can just sweep one of them. So you can see we get this nice, we get this low poly thread. And if we want it to be super quick, we can make this even lower poly by dropping our point count there. So very low poly, and it goes even quicker if we say sweep. We don't need caps. Although, is it going to create, I'm really frustrated that the new cinema object feeds all those maps, because that means those exist all the time, which slows everything down. I wish they only generated if you told them to generate. But anyway, let's see if we can turn on the cloner, and we're gonna make all these. If we set this to multi-instance, I wonder how quick it will run for us. I mean, that's just refreshing. Okay, it's refreshing incredibly quickly, so I'll take it. So you can see we actually have real geometry here, and with it being this quick, I'll give it a couple extra polys. Mink, mink, mink. Okay, so a couple extra polygons. So they might be stretched and everything a little bit weirdly, but now we have full control over doing, this is real geometry, so you could do any third-party renderer. Everything should work along those lines, so we can just create a material, and this material, we should totally be able to feed in different colors. So would the color vertex map transfer in? No, I think it just goes to the clones from that point. Yeah. So under color, we will feed it a MoGraph color shader, and then this color shader is not going to be doing much by itself right now, but if we go into the plane, which is where the colors are being generated from, it's being fed a vertex map, but we can feed in, I can say don't use that for the color, but I do want you to use the color vertex tag, and that's not going to affect the data, it's only going to affect the color. So that should bring in color information for us, and that should fade into the plane, and the plane will do the colorizing via fields color. Hopefully that works. The base object, we might want to, I'm not sure, but we might want to make the base color black and have the random. I don't want that color. It doesn't have color on it, so I don't know. Oh, okay, cool. So now they have turned green, which is the teal color that we are feeding through our vertex map. So this vertex map's color does seem to be coming through now. So we would have the ability to colorize those as we see fit, including some variation. So I know we're using a vertex color map. There's a lot of different ways we could do this, but right now it's behaving as our intermediary. But just for fun, let's create a random field. And this random field will also control color. And you see it's completely overriding and making a rainbow color. But just by taking that and pulling it back to a smaller percentage, we can have these all come through just a little bit and give us that color variation on top of the base. We can also multiply, overlay, do all of the things, and control it that way. A lot of different options. But now we're just controlling it via a vertex map, which is pretty cool. Looks like it doesn't like having a... Ooh, what did I do? I think I accidentally deleted the random effector. That's my bad. So yeah, these are coming out. They're still springy, and the new motion graphics multi-instance is going to allow for multiple colors, multiple clones at different scales and different rotations, and they just come through. And now because it's real geometry, even using vertex maps, it's entirely possible, and the cloner MoGraph color, that you can feed that into all the third-party shaders, which is really a nice addition to this. Yeah, I thought I know, I was kind of thinking we should go like really hardcore on this, but if you're to make even just a couple different types of threads, perhaps, but yeah, it just kind of works. The vertex map, I mean, we can grab the spherical field and change the fall off. I can give it no fall off, and that's just it's either there or it's not, which might be a little bit more accurate to what we were seeing. So that will translate through. The wire mesh is, right now it's cloning onto that, but we can grab the original one, copy paste, make it editable. And if you want that to look like a wire mesh, we'll do it with material, or with a separate piece of geometry. I can do an inner extrude, don't preserve groups, hit delete. And now we got wire mesh, and those should actually be sort of looking like they're poking through the hole. And then, I don't know, I'm just trying to think any place we can push it further, or that we should put effort into pushing it further, because it's pretty cool. One thought would just be, can we displace it a little bit just for fun? And I think all we have to do, because everything's getting cloned onto these surfaces, if we were to perhaps make a null, put both the wire mesh that we're seeing and the geometry that's getting cloned onto, if we move both of those inside, and we don't need that random field as a child, although it's nice to have it referencing the vertex map, so we could make sure to call this color. What I'm thinking is, let's deform the surface. We could do it with a displacer, but we could also do it, we're already using effectors, let's make a plane effector. I'm gonna put the plane effector in there and say, this is actually a deformer. It's deforming the points. See, everything moved up. I don't want it to move up, I want it to move out on Z. So let's say 0 and out on Z. So you see everything's pushing forward. And then we'll feed it the same the same different settings. So we can go to fall off and feed it the same vertex map. And I can see that that is what's going to get displaced forward, but it's going to get displaced forward. Yeah, I'm glad we did it this way, because you see the displacement's being really weird. It's very harsh. It's a very harsh displacement, which, that makes sense because the vertex map's at full power. So I'm going to make a copy of the vertex map, and we'll call it vertex map 2. And inside of that vertex map, I'm going to delete the other information, and let's feed in the first vertex map. But this time, let's see if we can see it. Let's make it visible so we can actually see what we're getting here. I'll turn off a bunch of stuff. So you see it's coming in very harshly, but I can say, hey, vertex map, I want you to come in as an average of what you're seeing. And there we go. Now we can soften this up to whatever degree that we want to by averaging and blurring it. And if it's not strong enough, then we can bring in our trusty curve and pull the power up higher like that. And now we got a soft version of that. And so this plane won't look at that vertex map. It'll look at vertex map 2. And now we have a soft version of it. And you can soften that up. It looks like I pulled this up a little too high. So I lost, you see it clamps because I pushed it too high. So just pull it back nice and smooth. So you kind of get that bump of the person behind it, maybe pushing the gun in. And now if we clone back onto the surface, we hide that one and we show the mesh. You can see the mesh pushing forward. All these threads should move along with the displaced form. And yeah, so we get these pushing out. Oh, I kind of forgot. It's going to remember. Interestingly, it's going to remember where it pushed it. So there's a pushing out. I want them to fade back in again. So it's another step, but we can just copy that original vertex map. And this decay is there forever. I'm going to say, okay, you can be there for a little while, but fade away eventually. And based on that, we'll feed this vertex map that vertex map. So this one is actually going to be, vertex map fade. So it should filter through the rest of the system, and now it should push it, and now you see they're going to return. Oh, look how much more life that gives it. Like there's a real feel of that, getting, something kind of harshly applied. One of the, I gotta say, there's a little bit of harshness in the way that these points are bending. I wonder how the vertex maps are translating over. It feels like it might not be the smoothest thing, but that actually just seems to be from that piece of geometry. So instead of showing that wire mesh like that, we probably just keep this original one and do a proper material. Super simple. Let's just make a grid plane, or let's go to alpha, put we can do whatever we want, but here's will it show up in the viewport? Actually, here's a method. I think they made changes, so it should work. We can make it a box and pull, that's about there, pull this over. So now you can see we got this nice little box like that. I'm going to apply it, and let's see if we can get the tile properly. So what do we set that to? I don't remember. It is 40 by 40. So let's tile that 40 and 40. Yay, it even shows it. So now that becomes the actual geometry. There's no extra geometry to slow it down, and it should just deform quite nicely. And it's super easy to make a change to that. Nice. Yeah, I'm quite pleased with that. There's a lot more we could do with it, but I think that's giving us most of the overall effect. A couple of these seem to be fading away. They're pushing in and out of the effect. That might be because we're actually displacing it. We might need to just change some radiuses on there so that they don't pop in again. But I don't know if we should spend any more time on this one, because I think we got the essence of it, and we're just having fun pushing it a little bit further. But just to be clear, I think what's happening is they're kind of popping out of existence because this is getting pushed away, and as it gets pushed away from the vertex map, it doesn't know it exists anymore. So actually, I think that's this vertex map. It's getting put into the plane, and the plane is seeing it as nearest. But if I set it as index, then it might fix it. Oh no, it's still popping in and out. But that's, which version is this seeing? Vertex map 2. This is not vertex map 2. Oh, it still kind of makes sense. That's vertex map 2 here. Oh, that's the displacement one. Sorry, I should have been in the cloner. In this plane. And that that is seeing the vertex map down here. So if we set that to index, does that fix it? Well, it fixed it and broke it in a different, interesting way. Apparently the vertex count is not identical there. Actually, we could leave it on nearest and just put another. That's a delay, but if we put a decay, yeah, that'll fix it. Put a decay, maximize, fixed. They won't fade away anymore. Nice. I mean, maybe going off a little off the rails there, but I think the effect is totally there. If we set the, we did a lot of stuff with vertex maps. I wonder if there's things we could have done where we didn't need vertex maps at all. And it would be good about not using vertex maps at all would be that you could change the the size of our netting, where right now we're kind of locked in on this. That's not entirely true. We could always extrude new ones. Actually, I'll just show you this as a bit of an exercise because everything here is based off of a single plane, and we kind of baked it down. And let's say you don't want to spend a bunch of time transferring everything to a different object and transferring maps. Let's just look at what a single polygon is. It's exactly 10 wide. So if I were to grab our edge here, can we just, can I easily select that edge? Well, it grabs the outline. I guess that's sort of helpful, but I don't want to grab that edge, but I do want to grab these two. And now let's grab that little straggler. Okay, if I hit D for extrude and extrude by 10, I could just say new, oh, no, it's set to 90 degrees, or it's got a rotation to it, so let me fix that. That should go out, and then the angle, is that the angle? No. Rotation should be 90. Interesting. Okay, so new. See, I've made it bigger. And then I think it looks like that maybe broke the UVW tag. Not something I was specifically expecting. Actually, I kind of would have expected that to automatically work, but I broke the material on there. But if we did a frontal projection and locked it, or just reset the UVs, which wouldn't be super hard, but I'm not going to do it now. I think the rest of this should automatically update. So I'm going to tell this to vibrate left and right more. X. Yeah, X. So let's jump up to 900. Yeah, so now you can see that has extended over there. So we can just keep on extending it. And you just want to make sure you do like the left and right, and then do the top and bottom. That way you don't get those little angled ones on the corner. Can we show it in color? Can we see it in color in a viewport? I mean, it's not showing it in color in the viewport. And then these aren't colorized because we're not feeding everything through the exact same way. But let's, I guess we can throw it out to the renderer real quick. I'm going to add a subdivision or two. Let's add a couple subdivisions on there. This could probably be set to adaptive. 10 degree adaptive. Yeah, get the curves where we need them. Render. It's not very fuzzy looking, so maybe we can make this look a little softer. We're just using the vanilla renderer. So under reflectance, what would cloth even be? Probably, yeah, really wide, flat specular. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but. And then we could twist, we can put like a big spiral on it. There's a lot of things we could do. Even on that sweep, if these are individual pieces of thread, if we did some stripes on it, let's see. We could spend a million years on this stuff. I'm just gonna turn on diffusion, which is really weird workflow. This is not the way I would be working these days, but as a way of doing this very quickly, if we created even a gradient, I'm gonna create a gradient on it, and let's see if it's spiraling the right way. Oh, yeah, that's not gonna affect the stuff I wanted to. We need more geometry for it as well. I don't care about the thread spirals. If we just want to see it in color, the color is the fall off, or where it's catching, is not quite where the fall off for the color is getting applied. So this vertex map is not as big, although I think if we just get rid of that, then those will all be green. Yeah. So I guess they're always green, but we could, it still has a variation in color. Let's up the variation a little so we can actually see that. Yeah, a little bit of variation in them. So I've broken this in several ways, but let's just do a little mini render. Boom. And then let's jump to the next question. Let's actually tell it to do more than one frame. And I'll just save it to the render folder, because why not? 3C yarn. Well, I would say this is one of our more successful forays into trying to make yarn do something. I think the next question is going to be from YouTube, so I'll start taking a look at those. Thank you, everybody, for the question. The questions in general. So hit play. Yeah, it's doing a pretty good job. I mean, I do think keeping them a little bit alive would be good. I'm just trying to think of a way. Oh, actually, I guess what you would. How would you do that? Kind of what I want to do is like a little bit of a wind of some sort. But you can't really do a wind, but I guess we could just do a random rotation with a nice big noise. That would work, right? So if we grab our cloner, apply a new random, and don't do position, but we will do a little bit of rotation. Not much. Let's say, and we don't, let's see, we got to be careful on the orientations we do as well. I don't even think it'd be random, to tell you the truth. Do we want a random? I think we actually want a plane on this. Yeah, I just want to make a quick wind. So if we use plane and we grab rotation, and I say, okay, everybody rotate. Okay, it's not going to be uniform. You see there is a uniformity to it. So let's say that those can randomly move 10 degrees. And then in the fall off, that's where we feed a random. So that will get a random field, which will not affect color. And even this, let's make sure that that's not affecting color. We don't need that to be doing color. Random field, and currently it's a perlin with an animation speed. Let's give it a animation speed of 55, which is probably too quick, but that's okay. And the scale is probably going to be pretty large, unless we should be able to see it in the viewport in a reasonable way. It's pretty mild. I'm going to speed it way up. Okay, yeah, we can see it wiggling, so I think the noise is still surprisingly small. We must be working on a relatively large scale here. And so we're looking at these other flat areas when they're not really moving. You see there's now a little bit of motion to them. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do. This plane is not in necessarily the layer I'd want it to be. And we're not pushing it too far. We could increase this up to 22, and now you can see they're going to be a little bit more alive. And as we make those scales do whatever we want, you kind of introduce a little bit of overall wind to the entire thing. I wonder if we'd even go to the min-max and go positive, negative. Yeah, so you just see there's I just wanted there to be a little bit of life to the overall thing. So yeah, it's kind of like, manually building. Actually, it's working better than I thought it would. So it's kind of like manually building in a little bit of a wind. It only needs to be as strong as we want it to be. Everything is getting cloned onto the entire surface. Even, they're stuck on the surface. So even as this thing moves around, we have the options and potential to do things like, I don't know if it'll work, but we can try putting a jiggle. And we can do the jiggle directly into the plane. But let's try doing a jiggle. So I'm going to put a jiggle right there. Let's just see if it does anything. I'm going to turn off this plane temporarily just to see. It doesn't really feel like the jiggle is doing anything, but it's not a direct child of it. I don't know if it needs to be. So just out of curiosity, this is doing a vertex map fall off. But if we put a spring in there, a decay, that's a decay. I wanted a delay. Put a spring in there. And let's not clamp it. Yeah, now you see we get this nice warble going. You see the wah, 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 wah. So it's kind of like the cloth has just got like a little bit of more of a ripple to it. And, however much we want this to spring, then the longer that will kind of have a little bit of life to it. But, so now we're kind of intentionally going overboard, but you see that this is going to stay very alive as that travels around and does its thing. And, depending on how much you want to apply it, it's pretty cool. I like it at, let's try doing just the 22. Yeah, 22 is maybe not enough. Just finding this nice in between. We get this nice little bit of wiggle, and then we can turn our kind of plain wind back on again, and that's going to keep everything kind of like this little bit of a breeze. And that's controlled via scale and via speed on this. So now that we can kind of clearly see it, you want it to be subtle. So I pull this down to, yeah, a little bit slower is a lot better right there. And maybe the scale's a little big, a little small. I don't know. A lot of fun ways of combining that. Save, render again. Let's just look at it a little bit in real time. Yeah, pretty happy with it. I mean, and the fact that it's geometry, it does open up a lot of third-party rendering possibilities, and it just goes to show, like, we don't have to overthink these things. Like, I would be inclined to be like, oh, let's make this cloth dynamics, or let's make it like a spline dynamics where the splines can be like not intersecting and overrunning. It's like we don't need that to be it. That's not the effect. That's not we're going to get the most bang for our buck. So some nice GI, some nice lighting, maybe some redshift. Get a twisting yarn actually traveling around this thing. I think it'd be pretty cool looking. Yeah. Yeah, we have a lot of control over that. It's pretty neat. Alrighty, but okay, so I think we spent the exact appropriate amount of time on that one, but I don't think we need to spend any more on it. I mean, it's the kind of thing we keep on exploring. We could actually make it draw a picture. You could put more than one. You could do different types of fabric in there, but the basic idea, the way all that gets fed through, I think we got it pretty well. I wonder if a thought that pops in my head would be actually putting hairs on these, but I don't know how well MoGraph would be able to scale them into existence. But it's like if you actually made these individual hairs here fuzzy, that'd be kind of a weird, crazy additional thing. I do wish, I wish we'd, if we had spent the time, we could make this look a little softer and fuzzier, because right now it looks like little loops of maybe like plastic. Kind of like a teal silly putty, but if they look really soft and fluffy, then you'd want to be petting it. And yeah, I think putting that little bit of extra wind in there is really good, because it's just the springiness, the extra layers of life where they don't quite die. They keep on being just a little bit alive. I think that's a positive thing. Cool. I like it. Yeah, thanks very much again for the question. That was a Twitch question. So Michelangelo, I'm not sure the man versus machine weaving effects you're specifically talking about, but that wasn't too crazy. And I think yeah, we can modify that rig a lot. There's a lot of possibilities there. Jaspal, how to stretch chain and break one link in slow-mo with dynamics. So I'm assuming you're just asking like to make a length of chain, and then if we wanted to have one of them suddenly break and then everything fly apart in slow motion. I'm trying to think if there's any tricks. I mean, or anything kind of crazy that I would do on that. I think for the most part, would I just kind of build it for realsies? I mean, I'm not going to look up reference. But my thought would be, if we make it a moving mesh, let's see. I'm going to make the quickest way to make a chain link is to make a rectangle, and let's make the height half the width, turn on lots of rounding, and there, boom, link. And then if we want to keep it pretty low poly, we can make a end side, put this into a sweep, end side, T for scale it down. We've got a link. If we're making a chain and we're gonna make it run, trying to calculate pretty quickly, we can drop our poly count here. which is, yeah, mostly going to be this number. We jump this up, and now you see it's even lower poly, even lower poly. So if that works for me, we could also set it to something like a uniform, and now you get an even distribution of these curves as it goes, but that can create unnecessary geometry. So adaptive in this case is not a bad choice. Alrighty. So if that is a single link of chain, let's make a cloner, put it in linear. The length of that is 400. So this is per step, and it's saying 300, but I guess we want to account for the roundness. Let's just do an even 300. And now we can say every other one will rotate. Actually, they're all going to rotate 90 degrees, but that just means 90, 180, and they keep on offsetting. So now we have essentially an infinite chain generator. So let's keep it real simple. I'm going to do one length of chain like that, and then we can create a copy of it. Hold down Shift, spin it around 180, E for move, scoot it over like that. So those become our two different chains that we can pull. They will eventually become dynamic. Actually, I guess we can do that right now. In top of that, I'm going to create an instance of this. Rotate it 90 degrees. Nope, not that 90. How about that 90? Nope, not that 90. How about this 90? There we go, third time's charm. Okay, that one will become a static one, and this one will become a static one. So all of these become dynamic, but these two will become simulation, collider body, static mesh, and these two will become simulation, rigid bodies, moving mesh. Now, I'm going to give it almost no friction so they can kind of freely slide. We don't need any bounce. But these types of rigs they're going to take longer to calculate. Building some sort of compound shape could potentially be a good idea, but that can get complicated in itself. So, this relatively simple setup could be a way to go right now. Now, when it comes to the breaking of a chain, I think we can't make it happen automatically. Well, I mean, maybe there's ways to do it. So one thought, I don't know how well this will work, but copy one of these outer ones. I'm going to reset to PSR, scoot it into the point where it break. Looks like I didn't quite line these up properly. So I'll grab those and just scoot that in. So a thought would be, we've got this new one in the middle, make it editable. And what if we made this one a soft body just for fun? This could be bad, but in the rectangle, making it editable, turn off the sweep for just a moment. And where would the chain, I mean, I think chains would usually break kind of on one of the, it would get bent around and welded kind of like right around here. So if we're going to make that a break point, I'm going to hit knife tool, K being the setting. I'm going to do a cut and a second cut very close to it. So you have point. So now I can select that middle point and delete it. Actually, I'm going to say set as first point, and then I'm going to delete it, and then go to rectangle and say close, don't close spline. The reason I said set as first point is it made it so that this break point actually happened there. Now those are very close together, and you're going to see that those are very, very, very close. The closer they get, or we can even potentially make them overlap, is kind of a reality. I'm trying to think of what percentage chance I think that a soft body chain link is going to work here. I don't think it's a very high number. We could do one more cut there and move those very close together. Not quite touching, but very close. So that's pretty good. So let's say that's the break point. Now, can a soft body withstand what we're about to do to this thing? I don't know. So that is a moving mesh, but it's going to be made of polygons and lines, meaning it's now soft body. By default, it's going to be super floppy and just fall apart. So let's give it some stiffness of 100 or of 11. We know it starts getting crazy if we go too high. Good time to save. For A, Breaking chain. We'll worry about the slow motion in a little bit. Let's just see if we can get this to do anything. Hit play. Everything's holding together, and it's going to go. Yeah, it tears right through it. Not exactly surprising. Now, that is soft body. Couple thoughts. It's soft body, so the poly count is incredibly important. Yeah, it's really important. The stiffness is trying to hold it, but that's just going to pull right through. Yeah, a lot of those will just pull right through. Let me think. We could crank up the stiffness more and then crank up the... Well, let's not crank up the stiffness. Let's just crank up our steps per frame. This will get messy quickly, but let's just see what happens. Still running relatively well. So the extra steps per frame. Okay, you see that they are actually linked. It is still trying to maintain its shape via stiffness. But stiffness is, I forgot. Well, I didn't forget, but I wasn't thinking. No, actually, you see it actually kind of in a springy way. It did hold there. It's not the best ever, but this springy chain is holding. So I think jump this up another 10. Oh, okay, it did refresh. I thought it broke. This should be enough to keep it. Like, it's going to hold and then spring back in. Now, a problem is that this is based off of stiffness, and stiffness is a brute force tool. It's constantly telling every part to return back home. So we don't actually want stiffness. We'd actually want a lot of structural, and there is no way that a bunch of structural with a lot of damping and a lot of shear power with a lot of damping and a lot of flexion power with a lot of damping is going to be able to withhold the pressures that this chain is putting on it. So that should... Actually, I'm kind of shocked that worked better than I thought it would. So some thoughts. You see that this chain is holding, and then as this pulls, it pretty clearly is pulling it, but because it's not based on stiffness, you see it's actually bending it apart, almost like you'd expect the chain to break. Kind of cool, working better than I thought it would. So I don't know if this will work, but it's working better than I thought it would. So here's a thought. I just hit save. All of these chains weigh a lot. They all weigh the same amount. So something I'm thinking is if we grab all of these chain links, except for the one that we're on, let's lower the density. I'm going to go into the mass, under density, change it to custom density, and let's make these weigh like 1/10 of what they currently do. But this one is still weighing more, meaning it has a lot more influence. I don't know if this will change anything, but let's see if that... Yeah, okay, it does. You see how it seemed to hold together better? Actually, that's working really well. Let's lower the density. I'm going to lower the density even more. Refresh, please. Hold. Oh, not bad. Yeah, okay, so this... Well, even that got really twitchy in an interesting way there. Actually, maybe we push it so far that the dynamics... And let's keep in mind that the dynamics are cranked up to a really high level. So it looks like there might be a limit to how far we can push this density down. It does seem to have additional effects that we're not necessarily accounting for. I'm going to attempt to do the opposite, which is to crank up the density of this one. Custom density, and let's just make it 11 so that, these are 1/10 of what they used to be, and this is 10 times what it used to be. So it's a lot heavier, but in the world of dynamics and soft bodies, it also means it's a lot stronger. Wow, it's so strong that other ones broke before it did. Once again, this goes to a question of density. And I want it to be strong enough that I actually have to pull on it to make it break. Now, gravity is actually a fairly large variable here. So if we chill gravity out, I don't mind there being some gravity. Under dynamics, I'm going to drop gravity to 1/5 of what it currently is, just so this is a little more gentle. And you see we're getting this kind of jerky oscillation. These are really fighting each other. I don't know how much of that is... I mean, we've got there's a couple things. A lot of very, very heavy steps per frame, and we're not that far, but as you get heavier steps per frame, it can introduce this type of jitter potentially. And there's things we might be able to do to chill it out. One would be, let's put in a little more damping, let the energy drain out from them. Actually did visually feel like it's calming them down a little bit, but that's a very heavy-handed tool. The density is another one that I'm going to put back to its default density and just see if that is a variable. Like these, they're acting like they're very bouncy, but this isn't very bouncy. Well, these are saying they have varied amounts, but I thought, yeah, we set those down to 0. These aren't, but that really shouldn't filter down. But I'm going to set all of the bounce down to 0 on everything. Yeah, you boom, boom, boom. Like everything starts jiggling around all over the place. Somebody's suggesting a little bit of follow position and rotation. That's a very that starts behaving like stiffness. It's a very brute force tool, and everything would be trying to return to its original position and its original rotation. And these are supposed to be freestanding chains. I guess it just is turning into all the scales in here. Like it's a good default scale. I don't know why we're getting so much jitter. I'm actually inclined to lower this. These type of situations, like too much accuracy is actually potentially a bad thing if it's escaping. You see how we're getting less of these fighting each other? I mean, they're still fighting, but there's almost less of them fighting with fewer steps per frame. And actually, you see, I lowered the steps per frame, and it's actually working a little bit better. And some of this goes into like, this goes to like, I don't have a deep understanding of like the difference with maximum solver steps. That can be a thing where it's like, how many times do they go back and forth? It's just like, as soon as one of these hits the next one, it's really kind of like it's really introducing like this big jerk of energy. And I'm not sure where that's coming from. We'd have to spend a lot of time kind of focused on it. So instead, let's just focus on these pulling apart. I want to see if we can lower this even a little bit more down to 10, because everything's moving relatively slowly. And in fact, this is supposed to be a slow motion animation ultimately. So if we're ignoring all that, can we push this any further to make it really, strong? The shear and flexion are the main ones. Now, once you I've pushed this as far as like 1500, but even that starts getting to the level where it gets upset at it can introduce vibration. Now that vibration from this, I don't think is what we're going to be feeling here that much. I wonder if stiffness. Okay. Well, okay. Here's what we might be able to do. Just once again, focusing in on the chain. We can use a lot of stiffness, and the stiffness can be like, no, you're stuck. You're constantly trying to repair yourself and be as strong as you possibly can. We can also, I'm going to say, a lot of damping to drain the energy out, and the stiffness, jump it up to 55. Is that too much? I mean, you see it starts getting a little bit jittery. You see we're getting like these little like shakes in it. That's how it's happening because we put this number too high. If I lower it, then the jitter will be not as bad. So some stiffness is now keeping that pretty stiff. So next step would be, let's actually try and stretch this. Let's see how far we can stretch it. So this would be a good opportunity to use Signal, but we're doing kind of a no plugins thing in general whenever I can. So the new thought is this will be a weird workflow. Essentially, I just want to keyframe this from what we'll just keyframe. I don't need to make it overly complicated. We're on X, keyframe that, hit play, and how far? I mean, that settles down pretty far. So this is going to move away from it, but hit undo. I want to move this exactly on Z. And I guess ultimately we want it to break. So I guess I'll pull it further than I think it can go, like that. This might happen too quickly. Yeah, it's tugging very quickly, so a lot more time. Ding, 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 ding. Okay, so right around there is kind of it at its full length. I want it to have a lot of time. I'm going to pull this way further, even still. Gently does it. It's broken the wrong spot. What do we do with that? I mean, we're not out of slack. This still could be pulled taut a little more. Now we're kind of at the point where it should be taut. So I guess it breaking at this point is reasonable, and it does seem to survive until that point. So if this is where that's going, well, now we start getting into the idea of the slow motion part. Do we even worry about the slow motion? Does that just come after the baking, perhaps? How do you remap a dynamic sim? Is there a way of remapping the timing of dynamic sim? I'm sure there is. I just haven't really done it. So we'll attempt that. Let's keyframe the stiffness, and it's going to be eyeballed. So that's fine here. The stiffness is already allowing that to bend a little bit, which is, perhaps premature, but right around now, I'm going to keyframe that. And then, well, broken in a different spot, but over that course of those frames, that will have gotten its stiffness down to 0. Thus, hopefully, that is what breaks. Nope, it broke in 2 other places. I'm entertained by its tenacity. Digital meat, yes, there is a time scale, the global one, but then everything takes a long time to calculate, and you have to resim everything. All your timing gets thrown off. I want kind of a universal one, where if this works well enough for us, I guess I'm just going to play with the steps per frame, put that back to default. I wonder if our scales are larger or smaller too. That's something I've been playing with more lately, is this world scale. I'm going to double it, just see what kind of difference we get. It's a little bit more herky-jerky. Cut it in half. No appreciable difference. It's the different sim, certainly. But not much in the way of a visible change. Jump it up to 25. Now, we did already see that the jitteriness is kind of bad there. But it does make it strong enough where that is what breaks, where it's already decently slow motion. I do wish we could smooth those out. I don't know what the specific... specific part. Man, yeah, these are just... they're just real clunky in the way that they're connecting there. I mean, there's other things we could do. Something we could do is put connectors on those. Yeah, they'll be able to move around less, but you actually put connectors on each of those, and those would be forced to become quite smooth. I don't feel like that's something we should need to do, honestly. At the same time, we did crank a lot of these other settings up very high. And, well, no, but these are only on one specific object. I do think we can lower these back down again for that, because stiffness is what's holding it. Let's see. Stiffness, and then the stiffness it's bending a little bit. Suddenly stiffness goes away. Snap. And then, I don't know if that's returning to its shape, but all the drag is kind of keeping it still bent, which is nice. However, we can use this elastic limit and actually do a break on it. So if I drop that down to something relatively low, like 5 degrees, as it bends, we got to be careful. If we do it too low, it'll pre-break. As it bends, it will actually plastically deform it, and that becomes its new shape. So yeah, we lost a little thickness, but that will never return back to its original shape. It's going to stay completely bent, which is nice. And putting that back to default, I wonder if we could... I've experimented, but I don't in my head have a good setting or a good idea of what the damping limit is. If we do enough draining of energy, it also might stop it from ever wanting to return to its original. So this has no plastic deformation. Yeah, it's still saying pretty bent, so depending on what we're doing, that could work. Now, let's see if we can retime some dynamics. I know we can slow down the global timescale. Save that, Control D. I'm thinking we go to cache and just bake the entire scene. It's not that long. Calculate pretty quick. Pro Tools, are you talking about back in the day when I was using soft bodies for years before I realized that it didn't say damping. I thought it said dampening before I realized it said damping. So that's baked. We should see this in real time. Yeah, this is super fast now, so it is still relatively slow. Pretty jerky, all those vibrations, not a big fan. I feel like that'd be something separate to go and look into. I think a lot of it has to do, I almost guarantee a lot of that has to do with these being moving meshes, and those polygon on polygon meshes are going to be real clunky. It's going to be kind of rough. So that is baked. Cached data. Use playback time. What is that? Oh, okay. So maybe that's all we need right here. Here's the cache. So we have a playback time. If we play that back in slow motion, will it give us in between frames? I don't know. So here's the playback time. If we start at 0, when do we want to start? Let's even start here. We'll keyframe that. I want this to be linear, so I'm going to say Control D. We're actually already in Control D. Keyframes linear, please. Delete that. At this time, we can start at 93. Fast forward at this time, we want it to be up at, I don't know, let's say right around there. So now it's taking like 300 frames to play through less than 100 frames. Let's see if actually we'll do that. As far as I can tell, it does. Oh. The dynamics are, but that object is not part of the dynamic sim, interestingly. So our simulation was retimed, but our actual keyframed animation was not. But if we ignore that, let's just zoom in on our chain. So if we're here, bink, it's working surprisingly well. I honestly, I was like, well, let's do soft body and show you a way it won't work. And it did work. I'm wondering, well, I'll save this as a baked version. I'll keep that as that version. Clear the cache, kill all the stuff off. Don't worry about playback times. Oh, yeah. Oh, that pseudo broke. It sort of broke down there. It's one of those weird breaks. It's just the retiming of the dynamics and everything. I'm not surprised, but that did break. This is all running. Oh, it fixed itself. Damn you, refresh. I mean, I'm glad it fixed itself, but that's the thing. Giuliano is mentioning if we were to change the collision margin, yes, you can make it more accurate. It takes longer to calculate, and in this particular circumstance, I don't think it's going to fix anything because our margins are not that tight. This margin, if this has a margin of 1 and it kind of has like a force field around it of 1 unit, this is not within that tolerance, just as an experiment, because who knows, maybe that is going to be the case. I'll go to expert, go to collision margin, and set that down to 0. There are a lot of circumstances, including in that really fun dynamics tutorial that I have coming out, that could be a circumstance, but you're going to see that this will be slightly, I mean, they technically are getting closer to each other, which can be bad in certain circumstances, but it's not changing the jitteriness. It's all still very shaky, and still our soft body didn't break before one of the other pieces did, which I continue to be entertained by. Now, I mean, I would love to spend some time and work on just figuring out this jitter. That's more of something I would do in tomorrow's stream. It would just be a lot of tomorrow's bonus stream, which if you're following on Patreon, you could get access to. Where I can spend more time and really try and noodle with the settings. It's not something I want to do right now. I'm trying to think if there's other alternatives. Like I said, we could use a connector and connect these. And another thought is, actually, this is something I'll spend a moment on, would be trying to make a compound shape of some sort. What would the options be? One thought, which would be amazing dynamics-wise, it would be super smooth, would be an array of spheres that are all treated as a single mesh. Is that even a thing? Okay, this will be weird, but let's find out. I'll begin by copying the rectangle. So this gives us a nice shape to start out. And then using a cloner, clone onto an object, the object being the rectangle, cloning a bunch of spheres, set it to step, shrink the spheres until it's about the radius I want this chain to be, to make enough of them that they're pretty accurate. I think we could let them like make extra ones and let them intersect. Something like that. So can we make this into a compound collision shape that is viewing these as spheres? That's a question. That's a heck of a question. So collision, apply a tag to children, yes, but I want to be a compound collision shape. The shape is currently automatic, but I'm going to say, I want you to be ellipsoids. So does that work? That'd be crazy if it did. If I play, it will fall, it will collide. It's staying vertical, which is weird. Unless this isn't, maybe the entire thing is being treated as an ellipsoid. So here's how we figure this out. Make a second one. That's what we do. Drag that into the rectangle, copy paste the rectangle, rotate the rectangle, never get the right one. Third time's a charm always. Hey, second time's a charm on this one. Do that. Do they explode? No. No. Well, I'm confused why it's not falling over sideways, but are those being calculated as spheres? I don't know. So if one of them sort of worked, let's bring over our cloner. And clone those. Reset, reset, just zero everything out. Like that. And this one becomes a this one becomes not dynamic. Zoom, zoom, zoom. All right. So, all right. Now, okay, so spheres are pretty magical as far as the collisions. They're incredibly accurate with their calculations. So we're running at very high frame rate, which is nice. Essentially, let's do the same test, but push it further and see if these are more stable. Now, keep in mind, we're in a new scene file, so we have all the default dynamic settings again. That seems good so far, but we haven't put it into the trouble zone yet. Copy, paste, spin them around. It's a significantly longer chain than we had last time. Here will be our middle point. Actually, why am I doing that? Why am I making two chains? That's just silly. We'll just make one chain, whatever length we want. Oh, I guess that was if we were making breaking. We needed that for the breaking middle point. But we don't need that in this particular circumstance. So I can just do that. Oh, if we make this one not dynamic. All right, go away floor. You're not helping us here. Ding, ding. Oh, let's see what we get. Do we get, because these are, like I said, my theory was that our problem was we were treating those as a, we were treating them as a moving mesh, and that means it needs to calculate every single individual polygon, and that's just rough calculations. These are being calculated as a series of interconnected spheres that are truly locked onto each other, and spheres are very mathematically precise. So look at the accuracy we're getting from these. It's beautiful. Boom. Like that chain that's working amazingly. Let's try pulling it apart. Keyframe. Pull. Let's even pull too far to the point where it has to break. Actually, that's not going to be very far. So that should definitely break. So remember, these are default settings right now. And oh, look how smooth that is. It's gorgeous. Now these will be, now it's getting vibrating now because they are being forced into each other. You see the collisions are actually passing through, even if they're spheres. And then eventually it does snap, but it's very smooth. I'm quite pleased. Okay, that was easier than I thought it would be, and it shows you the power of building something out of very accurate calculations. It's a weird way to do it, but that does work. Even right now, we're making this out of a series of spheres, which is a good, if we're just going to clone a bunch of them, it's a good process. Keep in mind, we could, spheres became like this magical setting in dynamics that I love using. If you watched my cloth tutorial series, like the product reveal where we like pull cloth off of a car and whatnot, spheres are like the solution to fixing bad dynamics calculations because they just calculate so accurately. Floors and spheres, I mean, box type is also useful, but these will calculate so smoothly. If we don't keyframe this away and we just let it hang out here, all of that jitter that we were seeing before is just completely gone. Now, of course, these are looking like this. Let's make sure that we could replace them with the proper looking chains. So to do that, I shall simply copy one of our sweeps, which are the same scale, paste it in. Now, because it's not going to be the actual dynamics, I don't mind increasing our point count a few. The center point should be the same, hopefully. So my thought is, what if we just create a cloner, set that to object, well, it is going to be cloning these. The object it's cloning onto is that cloner. It's going to look ridiculous, but setting the distribution to axis, it's cloning directly onto the axis. So now we can hide the original cloner, and these are just cloned onto that one. And if it were, oh, it's not following as we hit play. Probably because those are dynamic. Dang it. Oh, that would have been nice. I think this is one of those cases where if we cache it, it will follow, but right now it's not following. Having said that, though, I think maybe we could just feed it in the same system. If that's where the dynamic tag is on here, but if I were to put it on there, does it still work the same way? Yeah, that still works the same way, which means that is the compound dynamic shape. So if I make that a child and reset, it is now in there, but I don't want it actually to be getting calculated as a shape. So I think if I copy this tag over to it and say dynamic, well, I'm just going to turn off enable. So I can also say off, but that might be redundant. This is now saying, hey, dynamics, ignore me. I've got my own dynamics, but it should be hopefully going along for the ride. Yes, it does seem to be. So now we can stop this one from being seen in the viewport and the renderer. So now we get all of the very, very nice, accurate calculations and a chain or the links that look as smooth and detailed as we want, and it's being ignored for the purposes of the dynamic calculation. There's probably several ways to go about doing that, but now you can see very accurate, high poly geometry. That's not being calculated at all. We have crazy high sphere-based ones that are working really well. The power of math, people. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Well, we have hit our 2-hour mark, but let's take a look at, let's see if there's anything else. Give this a little save because we figured out, or smooth, or let's say no jitter chain. So yeah, that my theory was, I think my theory was correct. All of that vibration and jitter was being generated because bullet dynamics, which is what these are based off of, just can't handle poly to polygon collisions that well, but it can handle cubes and spheres really, really, really well. So that is a awesome best of all worlds type of situation. Now, I don't want to, we can be done with this one, but just as a way of kind of doing a little bit of a follow-up, just chatting through it, it is entirely possible that we could have used this type of setup and created a series of connectors between them and had those connectors trying to keep their shape, and that could also bend itself. But we could have also just done a keyframed method Let me think. Actually, I kind of do want to do it now. A couple people are having to leave. Thanks so much for hanging out, everybody. It's appreciated. I'll see you next week. All right, I'll leave it to the chat. The first answer I see is the answer I'll take. Should I try and do a different version of this chain breaking, or should we move on to a different question? And we'll see who answers first, and that's what we'll do. Oh, first answer seemed to be, yeah, okay, everybody seems to say new question. All right, we'll do a new question. Though I do have some intriguing thoughts as to how that might be able to break. So I kind of want to do that, but I also know that we should do more questions. That question was, I believe, from YouTube. Sean Ray, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I apologize. I tend to not interact with the chat too much in between the little segments, just so that when people are rewatching, that's not like constantly getting interrupted. I try to, but sometimes when I get stumped, I check it. Jespal, I appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so let's check out different questions. Ooh, dangerous. Java has a question about morphing cloners. Let's see what we've got here. Is there audio? Audio is dangerous. Audio gets me flagged on YouTube. One moment. That's from Java. Okay. So what do we got here? Cute. Bling, 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 bling. Oh, yeah. How would you do that? So this is from David Braun. Real-time Synchron TensorFlow plugin. So that's a plugin made from someone. And Tensor, what's TensorFlow? These are flowing very nicely. Whew. Bling, 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 bling. Oh my goodness. I mean, there is some interesting things where do you see how these points actually jump from one letter to the next? So I mean, obviously a very specific plugin's being used to run that. I don't even know in what core software, based on different code. There's a lot of really neat little attributes to that. We don't need to completely, it's not my goal to rebuild that in some sort of identical way. The main thing goes to we just need identical point counts, but that is non-trivial, which is a word Adam Savage uses all the time. Like, what's the opposite of trivial? Non-trivial. It is a non-trivial question because if we're feeding in different letters, very clearly the surface of this letter is going to be very different than the surface of that letter. So how do we get a very even distribution between all of them? And then once we have that, yeah, I agree. Apoxia, I think. Apoxia. Welcome. I don't recognize your name, so I'm not sure if you've hung around before. Inheritance Effector is a good way to begin, but that is going to want the same point count, the same indexes. So a thought that I'm having would be we need to create a series of splines, and this would be a fairly manual process. Yeah, there's like some different suggestions coming in about like creating clones in a regular grid and whatnot. But once again, it goes to we need the same point count. So yes, we could create a regular grid and then say only where these intersect on this is, but we wouldn't have the same point count. Now, would it work perfectly everywhere? The thought that I have, I don't think so, but I do have a thought. I want some nice chunky letters and one that I just know we can use impact, but it's boring. So we'll use the Rocket Lasso, like big bold letters. Well, I guess these are a little bit angled. That's fine. Let's see. What's a good Let's make 3 letters. What's a good little 3-letter acronym or something? 3 different letters. 3 letters. That would be real. I guess we just say C4D. Why am I overthinking it? We use C enough. Multi. I thought Ken. I thought that was multi-level marketing, which would be entertaining. But okay. Well, here's a thought. Here's my thought: is if we create a series of lines via splines, and I mean, it won't take too long. And the curvatures, I mean, the spacing of this doesn't really matter. What mainly matters is just this matching. So if I can do that, and I don't want to take too long, so maybe I'll just make 4 lines per. And there is no quick way of doing this that I know of. I'm not being overly precise. I'm kind of alternating these, which is a bad idea. And they should probably all line up with each other, but I'm not terribly concerned. 2. So if we were to do that, I'm only going to make 2 for now. So it'll just be C4, which is also, you know, can be pretty cool. C4, if we're, nope, don't hold down shift. 4 layers on this. That's a little trickier, but they're straight lines, so maybe. I know I just want them all to be the same spline. I know that we already have it kind of existing. Don't close. And I can even take liberties and simplify this. So escape. Line, line, line. Line, escape, continue line. Look at that. Look at that hack. Z, Control Z. Didn't mean that one. Let's do that, that, and that. Okay, good enough. Now, here's the thought. I have 2 different splines, each with 4 layers. But splines, I think we can control the absolute count. That's why we went into that effort. And we can't just fill up the surface. And that's because a spline uniquely enables us to say, I want a total count. And you see right here, it says a count of per segment. I don't want it to be per segment. I want it to be total. So if I type in 100, and we feed this a cube, then that should be cloning around that spline based on a count of 100 total. The distribution's not great, I gotta say. Is that based on the spline? If I say uniform, does it fix it? Kind of yes, kind of no. Distribution is not great. We could set it to step, but I mean, maybe step is better. But then we can't count on this count being the actual count. We might even need to do a tiny little hint of espresso to do it properly. Crossfader, I'm not following. If you make a example file, though, I'd love to see it. Love is greater than C4D. C4D is love. No. Anyway, what's bugging me is the spacing here is, you see that it's taking the length of the spline. So if the spline is longer, and it's putting more spacing between them. And none of these checkboxes are going to fix that. And right here, it turns on 100 per segment. It doesn't fix the problem. The only one that does fix the problem would be step. And step is now actually giving us very even distribution between all of them. You can see in a very nice way, there's very even distribution. I like that. But the problem is now this is an arbitrary count. But that makes sense. That would be kind of the trade-off. So this is not outputting in anywhere that we can see the actual number of clones. So what I propose is a very simple espresso rig where I believe we can get that data. So this cloner can come in and we can output. There's no information here, but if we, I'm not sure. Let's go into motion graphics, data, maybe. Yeah, data. Let's feed in the cloner, and there's the count. So the count will actually tell us how many there are. We can feed this in anywhere, but I like making it visual. There's our text. Bring in the text, feed in the count into the cloner, output text. 118. There's our number. So we have 118 on that. Now, copy and paste to the cloner. Delete that tag. This one should have taken over. This one will clone onto the other letter. And now you can see a different one. And you can see that's only 81 because just the overall length and lines, everything, the same settings are creating a lot less. So we need 118. So if we actually wanted these to match, we need to change this distance until we get 118 exactly, which will be maybe a little tricky. I don't even know if it's possible. So got to do decimals, 0.5. Oh, okay, 0.55. There we go. That wasn't too hard. So now we should have two different letters with identical clone counts. So kind of arbitrary clone counts, which is nice. So then the thought turns into we don't need to see the first or second cloner. And now we have a separate one that can do whatever anything it wants. And we can use the inheritance. Now I did make a third. We could just keep the two. But to keep it clear, we have the letter C. Number 4. And this one can be the morph. So morph, you need, that's cloning onto the spline. That's fine. It just needs an inheritance effector, I think. So we say inheritance is going to inheritance from, is it direct? We might need to do a morph. I don't know. I'll drag in this 4. Turn on morph motion object. Nope. Turn on animation. Nope. Direct. Morph motion object. What am I doing wrong? Inheritance. I don't use inheritance too often. That should be getting the inheritance, which is looking at the 4. I thought that would just like pop into it. What am I doing wrong? Ignacio, that could potentially work. I don't know how nicely your distributions would be, but you could possibly use the, because this isn't working. I'm gonna wait to see if somebody, a couple people have different ideas. I don't want to matrix on text object with polygon surface inheritance effector. On one of them will keep the point count while morphing. Yeah, that's true. You could just do surface. Maybe it's more forgiving than I can remember, but honestly, it's not even working right now at all. Inheritance, why are you not morphing? Animation based. Morph. Maybe I named them backwards. That would explain it. Direct. Yeah. Okay. My bad. That's the C and that's the 4. I was like, why isn't the C turning to 4? Because it's not 4. So there we go. C4, C4, C4. Now you can see how they're really transitioning all their positions, and it's because it's doing a direct transition. I wonder if animation is any different. Yeah, they're not trying to find the nearest one, their nearest replacement. They're just going directly to their equivalent index. So in order for it to go to the equivalent index, you'd want them to be matched similarly. Yeah, there's no rig that would automatically make these beautifully transition from one to the other in near identical ways. Not that I can think of. Yeah, that's more for me to dissect in my own time, crossfader, not necessarily in the stream, but we'll give it a go right now. Open. It's not cooperating. Oh, it just is taking a while to open. Open. Let's see what crossfader just sent over this file. Yes, open another one. That's fine. Is it keyframes? No. So presumably we just drag this and go blurp, blurp. But you are doing a matrix, and yeah, you are filling it with the volume with a count. So it's like the same idea, but so yeah, you're filling one volume with a count, another volume with a count. And you're transitioning between the two, which is cool, and that's a nice straightforward way of doing it. One of the goals of this was that we have direct control over where they're placed. Meaning, if let's say all the points begin up here, I can say set first point. Oh dear. Do I have to reverse? Oh, I think I have to reverse some of them. Apologies. That one and that one need to reverse. UW. Reverse. Now that you see these are all lined up and traveling the same way. We need to do a similar thing with the 4, but we started over here with the 4, where really we should have started over here. I don't know how well we can get around that, but this might break something. But I'm going to grab points that are approximately close to each other and set those as the first point. Yeah, it broke those being open and whatnot, and the distances will change the count. So I'm actually kind of curious what that will do. But yeah, I mean, it's just going to be weird because that one point has to go to the other one. It's giving us more direct control over where they go. But I gotta say, it's not great. It's not perfect. Now, you could just clone to a surface, and as someone else suggested, I mean, there's a couple of good ideas. There certainly is some different good ideas here. I guess I deleted, or I kind of worked my text there. But if we were to make just the letter C, as somebody said, we might be able to use a polygon reduction in order to create the same number of polygons. If this was heavily subdivided, which can be fun, we can turn on a Delani. You get all these subdivisions, can look nice. Twirl it down. You even have a few settings to tweak around. Sometimes they do things, sometimes they don't. We turn them into quads. Just a kind of a nice semi-even distribution of points. Now, we don't have a direct count, but I do believe one of the cool features in... I'm not the biggest fan of this polygon reduction, unlike the other one, but we do have a vertex count. And I think we do have the ability to just type in what count we want it to be. I don't often do this, but every setting changes every other setting. So if we type in 222, then that should have exactly that count. And if we copy and paste a second one, actually they're not identical, so maybe there's a lack of refresh or something. Change this letter to something completely unlike it. Let's say like an M. Without the polygon reduction, we need this to be heavily subdivided. Easy enough. Just tell this to be subdivided. There we go. Lots of triangles. Polygon reduction. Also set it to 222. If that works, I don't know. This one, 222. Hopefully those are the same. I don't know. And that becomes, there's more of a distribution. I don't know how it determines the point count everywhere, but let's just see how it does this transition. It should be pretty straightforward. I wonder if we can do it directly on points, but yeah, we make a matrix. The simple version here would be set it to object, clone onto this loft as vertex. So we've got one per vertex. Those are a little small, so T for scale. It shouldn't change anything. We just have the spacing, relatively even spacing, although not perfectly even. And then create a second matrix, and this one will clone onto our, oh, it's on the loft. Polygon reduction, please. The second one will be on the second one. So we have an M, we have a C. Now we can hide the C. And then we just need the inheritance on the second one. Boop. It's going to inherit to the first one as a morph motion object. Yeah, so identical point counts on that as well. So that's a valid method. And then, of course, we can clone onto a surface. The surface places them all randomly. So the point of doing it this way is that we get a kind of an even distribution. Having said that, we should keep in mind that we always have the ability to feed in a push apart effector. I'm not a big push apart guy, but yeah, that's cool. I mean, I like the way that visually looks. It's pushing apart only in 2 dimensions, so it's something. The second matrix can also be fed that. And now this one, inheritance comes after. So that'll morph between these two, which are not overlapping. We get the same count. So that could, the polygon reduction is nice. Actually, it's not something I thought about, but we can just type in the exact number we want, which is neat. Although the number keeps changing. This changed to 124. And that's 232. So I don't know how much I trust it, to tell you the truth now. Maybe the point counts don't need to be identical. I'm not certain. What does it do? Oh, yeah. I think they're not identical because you can see a bunch of these suddenly become 2. So it's actually a pretty smart way to do it. It just must loop the index around. So 1 becomes 2, and so you don't really need to worry about that if you're just full on faking it. Wee. Yeah, kind of weird though. But yeah, in the way that is not necessarily working exactly as we want, the alternative is let's clone onto the loft, not worry about the polygon reduction. Clone onto the loft, not worry about the polygon reduction. And these 2 matrices are cloning on the vertex, but we can say, no, clone it to the surface, and I just want to count, and I can just keep on increasing the count of how many there are. Now, it is distributing in a very peculiar way. Why didn't it do it like that? Oh, there we go. Maybe it's just the push apart effector. Yeah, so the push apart will do it. Now you can see that the matrices, we can say, hey, there's 183 on both of them. They should be identical. And now when we use the inheritance, none of these should be getting duplicates. They all have their equivalent. The only problem is that the indexes just don't match. It's not trying to find like the equivalent start point. And I mean, that's not a trivial thing. So like I don't like blame it. Yeah, I don't know the other mode very well. Yeah, I might even need to. I don't know the other mode, but it'd be like if you could say, oh, over here, I want you to be the equivalent of the one on the letter C. Here, actually, no. I guess this fall off is. Oh wait, why is a fall off doing anything? Oh, because the inheritance has a fall off. Different application of it. Actually, it's kind of weird. I'd have to think about that. Go away, fall off. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I would love if we could kind of make the like transition to like, and that's the part we're missing here. And I don't have a good solution to that. But yeah, there's like 3 or 4 different methods to get the same count or similar count, and that the inheritance still works even if they're not identical. It just makes copies. And I mean, I'm not going to go any fancier in here. In fact, we're going to wrap this up. The tricky part, or like not the tricky part, something fun would be if these were clones, you could make them dynamic, and as they transition, they'd be bumping into each other and fighting each other to get into their final position. That could be really cool from a motion graphics perspective. So artistically, they do fight and try and transition in a really weird way, but it works. Ignacio, what about the letters made of polygons and use the poly reduction to control the number of vertices? I mean, we did that, and then it just seems like the polygon reduction wasn't quite working. They kept changing percentages on us. Oh yeah, the old school GSG 7-up tutorial. That was like one of the first tutorials ever. One of the first Cinema 4D video tutorials ever. Wouldn't say that watching or similar streams has an impact or increase. Who wouldn't? Who wouldn't say? No, I agree. Pro Tools, I like it. I've watched a couple streams of some different artists doing not cinema, and it's always like, oh, that's really cool. It's all about finding somebody who can talk about things that are new and different. So, and that's what I try and do. It doesn't always work out, but sometimes it does. I definitely have a couple gamers that I follow now that I just really like. Totally, completely off topic, but if you get some more subscribers, it's fine with me. There's a really great streamer. Well, he's YouTuber streamer, and the channel's called Fail Race, and he does one of the types of games he does is he plays GTA 5 sometimes, and one of the best modes he releases one per month is a made up their own game inside of GTA, and they call it Survive the Hunt. So just Google Survive the Hunt GTA, and you'll find it. And he is wandering around as like 19 people are following. They're trying to find him, and he's trying to pretend to be an AI as 19 other people are trying to figure out who he is. And it's like the most tense, exciting, and I just like GTA. So it's really fun. You should check it out. I don't know why it just popped in my head because we're talking about streamers, but yeah, I really like that one. Okay, so that's neither here nor there. Thank you, everybody, so much for all the questions. It's fun as always. I will see some people tomorrow for the bonus stream, and I'll see everybody next Wednesday for this stream again. And there'll be a new tutorial, hopefully that dynamics tutorial, on Tuesday. So thank you so much, everybody. I will see you next week, if not sooner. So until next time, toodaloo, everybody.